Hello, and welcome once again to Reality Decoded this Sunday, the 7th of March 2021, week 52 of the 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Are we still flattening the curve? Is that still a thing anymore? Have we forgotten all about the curve? But welcome to those of you who have tuned in on time at 9 p.m. We are trying to get some regularity going here at Reality Decoded, but I do apologize. Sometimes, due to some circumstances and incidents that maybe can or can't be explained, we don't always abide to that regularity and scheduling. But here we are once again, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you to those that have chosen to tune in tonight to Reality Decoded, where we are going to be looking at weapons of mind distraction. Maiden Montana, Martha, Kaz, and Glynis first through the door today. Again, 2 in a row, Glynis. Good for you, girl. You're putting our little Cajun agent to shame. Hello, Laurie. Long time no see, sweetheart. So the regular offenders are tuning in or turning up slowly and surely. We may even get to double figures before we get to 10 minutes, or if or not that happens, who knows. In and about, Fireball is calling. I'm not sure what Fireball is all about, but it is good to see you guys, and I'm not exactly in a much better shape than I was yesterday, but I am in a better shape than yesterday, where I sort of somehow don't even remember how I got through the stream and was somewhat still in a little bit of a daze from the effects of a inadvertent overdose as taking, where are they? Nothing sketchy. Store-bought sleeping aid, and sort of as I've thought more and more about it and some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about tonight, was this of my own choice and decision, or was that thought implanted into my mind via cytronic weaponry, aka our smart devices that we use each and every day? Laura's got it going on and probably doing the right thing. She's got booze and 80s music. I wish I had some booze and 80s music, although I could quite easily put some 80s music on, shut the stream off and go in back in time to the 80s, if only in my mind, not physically. Now again, sort of time travel is something we looked a little bit at yesterday in regards to the Looking Glass, but it was a little bit of a half-hearted attempt, and again, my apologies for that. But rather than sort of slump into that, I can't be bothered, I'll just do it tomorrow, and then wake up today, I can't be bothered, I'll do it tomorrow pattern, I took an effort upon myself to throw a little bit of a stream together, and it wasn't really until like 8:59 yesterday that I really decided, let's just do it. And that's why it was a little bit delayed and didn't really give much of a heads up to anyone, but I did try to give a bit of a heads up today. Did get myself up a little bit earlier, not through choice exactly, and did get my production ass a little bit into gear. But some of what we will be talking about in tonight's weapons of mind distraction might well be a little bit of what has been affecting me, and maybe sort of what has been concluding me to maybe think, at least not rule it out completely, that maybe some of the decisions I took this week in order to maybe get a night's sleep, which was so sort of deprived me for a little while, and sleep deprivation is something that can be caused by electromagnetic frequencies, and although I am kind of sleeping a little bit naturally, it is more sort of catnapping than having that good night's sleep that is sort of refreshing, and you sort of wake up feeling recharged. So I seem to be waking up feeling more tired than I went to sleep. But last night, as I said, it was a little bit of a dazed and induced stream, and I don't really have an awful lot of recollection of it. But during that stream, we kind of talked a little bit about some of the effects of electromagnetic frequencies, and in particular I spoke about a spot on the top of my head, and I did show you my ugly noggin. It's actually freshly shaved today. Some of you ladies might like to rub my freshly shaved bald head, but in around here, exactly where I'm drawing a circle on this ugly old noggin of mine, I've got symptoms that feel, or sensation rather, that feels very, very similar to sort of sunburn. You know, if you had a little bit too long in the sun, you get that sort of tickly, prickly feeling. And again, when I'm sort of in the shower, it's sort of the hot water tends to aggravate it a little bit. Yeah, rub it for luck. Hello, there is our little Cajun agent. Kaz, I'm guessing you are departing once again for work. Always a pleasure to see you. Shame it is such a short acquaintance while you are here, but we are thinking about you, and I always appreciate the fact that you do make the effort to tune in as your day starts. And if not, this does give your day a little bit of a kickstart, or whether it just brings the doom and gloom, who knows. But yesterday, as I was saying, I was talking about this sort of strange symptom in my head, and little Darcy sings a lot, who's not here at the moment, wherever she may be. Who knows, maybe giving some dumpster tuggies. I doubt it. But there's a little bit of old school TSP TV thrift fam humor for you. But she mentioned that she also had a very similar spot on her head that felt exactly the same, and it wasn't so long ago that it was Things a Lot, and Darcy turned up to one of these streams and announced that she had to wake up her sweating husband. Now, I think she was in Florida a little while ago, but has since moved back to more northern locations, and will be subsequent to a little bit of winter weather that we do experience in the north, not like you blessed folks down on the southern border that do experience sunshine, although not exactly recently in Texas. You had a little bit of Canadianness going on in your daily routines weather-wise. But Darcy, she did mention something about she had a husband who was very sweaty, which is a little bit unusual during the winter months. Maybe the heating on in the house was cranked up high, and maybe, I don't know, he sort of fell asleep in his sweatpants or something. But still, nonetheless, she said he woke up sweaty, and sweating is something I've also been experiencing an awful lot through the winter months. Now, I do live in a basement. It isn't insulated. It's not cold. It is warm. But when it does sort of drop below zero, you do feel a little bit of a pinch in the airs and a cold touch on the wall. In sort of just dripping with sweat like I'm in a sauna is not really a sort of natural experience of wintertime conditions. During the summer, when I was out in the beach and it was 90 degrees sometimes here in Toronto, I hardly sweated a drop. And as I said, it's just one of those bizarre sort of what is going on here exactly. Now, you know, we've talked about EMF frequencies in low wave and radio waves, and how much of an effect these potentially can have on the mind, and the symptoms of these being, you know, sensitivity to being exposed to such frequencies and wavelengths do have a physical impact on the human body. And we also looked at the fact that the symptoms of electromagnetic frequency sensitivity is identical to that of what the symptoms of COVID-19 are, and the coincidence of 5G being launched and the global pandemic kind of almost line up perfectly. As I said, is that a coincidence, or is that part of the planning? Launch, you know, turn up the frequencies on our electronic devices, and then maybe we carry it around, and depending on what we type or what our opinions is that we put into social media, the electromagnetic frequency can be targeted via our artificial intelligent handler that resides within our phone, and then can maybe give us the symptoms of COVID that we then might think, oh my God, I've got COVID, I better go to the doctors and get myself tested. And then through the syncing of software and technology, when you get there, it's already predetermined that you are going to get a positive test. Seems a little bit out there and radical, but let's, again, not rule it out. I'm not telling you this is exactly what's going on. Let's just put it out there for possibility. And only when we consider it as a possibility can we either rule it out or think, well, yeah, that is a probable cause. But as I said, since around, you know, the loss of my father, which was sort of a bit of an emotional impact. Anybody losing a parent is not an enjoyable experience by any stretch of the imagination. But since sort of then, I've had a lot of sort of anxiety, grief, and other sort of related symptoms, but at the same time I've also had some very strange symptoms which are very similar to the symptoms of electromagnetic frequencies. I don't know what's going on about the timing there. Laurie, it's only 6 p.m. Steak and potatoes spurged. Hopefully, hubby, well, lucky hubby, turned home to steak and potatoes. What I wouldn't do for a wife that cooks me steak and potatoes, has booze and 80s music waiting. I'm pretty sure she might even roll a little something for me. But let's not get romantic and nonchalant on such whimsical ideas. And let's get back a little bit to talking about it. Now, you know, when I sort of experience these things and then try to share it with you guys, partly why is I'm trying to sort of scratch the surface to see if somebody else may say, yeah, that's right. Oh my God, I've been feeling that exactly. And when Darcy mentioned her head yesterday, that is when I'm like, okay, so it isn't just me. I'm not imagining things. Maybe they are. And maybe the synchronicity of the fact that we're all connected via watching these streams, that possibly this could be a targeted response for the algorithm. Okay, that Darcy girl, she listens to that TSP guy and he talks about mind control. Let's give her a little bit of burning sensation in her head. He forgot your anniversary. Well, husbands do that. You can always choose to leave him or stay with him and let him forget again next year. But I'm sorry to hear that, Laurie. That is a shame. But Maiden saying timing is everything. I'm guessing that is in regards to 5G and the COVID. But you know, if you want to send me some steak and potatoes and booed and weaved, Laurie, put a date in my diary and try to remember it next year and give you a little emoji in the chat like this. There you go. But I digress a little bit. So when I sort of hear these things, these symptoms that maybe other people share, and then you sort of start to think, okay, is there a pattern? Are we all targeted? Are our devices all in synchronicity? Is this what's staying 6 feet apart? Is this what the little social circles were? They want to sort of get, find out who your closest and nearest and dearest are, sync their little technology devices in those little circles, and then when you leave that circle, they can send you the same amount of programming. And over the course of the COVIDian times, I am seeing some sort of examples of what could only be described as sort of hive mind, almost cult-like behavior on social media, the share and agree culture that we seem to be embraced in now, where sort of you're not really allowed to have independent thoughts and opinions of your own, unless they share and agree with the desired content. And this is why we've got fact checkers and all sorts of community standards team going out of their way to silence what contradicts the official narrative. Now again, you can choose if you want to believe the official narrative or you take the contradiction, an alternative sort of account of what is going on as your own individual truth. And again, I make of this what you will. This is for your own sort of interpretation and to be able to sort of put it together in your head if or not this is any a possible reality, or if it is just nonsensical tinfoil hat conspiracy shit spurted out by a tinfoil hat dude in a basement, such as myself, streaming on YouTube. But something we did suggest yesterday that I do remember, that if these conspiracies are nonsense and they are fiction, who the fuck is writing this fiction? And how are they so intricately tying and piecing all the sort of things together that sort of, you can point the fingers and they all sort of seem to go to the same sort of people that seem to be perpetrating these so-called psychological operations and false flag events, the elites that are leading us and herding us towards the one world order. Funny enough, let me just get a little prop there. There is my tinfoil hat. Maybe I should start wearing it a little bit to see if it does have any reduce of the effects of these frequencies. Actually, no, that's a little bit too tight. So it was for prop purposes. But last night, again, after the stream, we did talk about these sort of symptoms and headaches and migraines and things that I've been experiencing. Some of you guys also agree that you've been hearing whistling in your ears or ringing in your ears. Some of you have also experienced headaches. I know Martha and I think it was Glynis said they had ringing in their ears and had left temple headaches. So after the stream last night, as I said, I was almost falling asleep towards the end of it and was in a semi-comatose state as a result of taking, you know, a whole box of pills, which again I'll get to it in a second. But these symptoms, I forgot what I was going to say now. I wanted to go to sleep. That was right. After the stream yesterday, I really just wanted to go to sleep and get into bed and put my head down. But I went, took a long shower, give myself some grooming, shaved my head, cleaned my pits, washed my crack, put my fresh PJs in, got into bed, watched a couple of episodes of a show that I'm watching, even made myself a little spot of a sandwich, and then thought, right, I'm ready for the land of Nod. Laid my head down on the pillow, and almost immediately, boom, the ringing in the ears got louder, and before I knew it, I had a burning sensation in the area that I've described. I got a very, very pounding headache in the left side that kind of felt like someone had put a metal bar through my eye socket right down through my nose and then was kind of pulling it like this, a little bit like a meat hook. And it was very, like, the pressure was horrible. It was like, oh. And the only thing that kind of relieved it was when I rolled over and led on that side, and it kind of sort of put the weight on my head. But it was like that for quite some time, and I still didn't get to sleep till gone 6 a.m. in the morning. And I only had about 3.5, maybe 4 hours sleep tops. So I'm still not feeling exactly, as I said, 100% or firing on all cylinders. So please forgive me. And again, this is sort of trying to get a little bit of routine and regularity, and maybe sort of combating some of these symptoms that are making me just want to veg out in slump in bed all day in a semi-comatose state. And something I do notice, I don't seem to get as much headaches when I'm not streaming or recording or editing. And now again, today I was doing a presentation looking at information on electromagnetic weaponry and cytronic weaponry, and before I knew it, I could hardly read the words in front of my head, started getting a bit of a headache going, I wanted to pee like almost every 10 seconds, and also started to get like cold sweats. And again, symptoms that can be caused via electromagnetic frequency. And we will look in the presentation exactly what I'm talking about. And sort of at the time that I was talking about this, I was sort of experiencing some of these symptoms. Now, again, are these psychosomatic, or are they actually, you know, is this actual evidence that this technology is being used against us? And, you know, I'm trying to unravel and piece the pictures together in my tinfoil hat dude basement dwelling YouTuber way, that we went all the way back to the 1980s at the dawn of first generation technology, when we first got digital watches, Walkmans, and we looked at some evidence that was circulated on, you know, CNN when it was reputable back in the 80s, and we've seen a couple of featured documentaries in which they told you exactly how easy it would be to control the entire population's mind with the technology that already exists and is in the home, you know, most people's homes. Now we are surrounded so much more in the 5th generation of digital technology. And is this the effects, you know, that I'm feeling? Are these the effects of the 5th generation of digital programming and effects over over individuals, and just how much individuality in the period of time since the digital era began are our own independent thoughts. And back to sort of Wednesday, although, you know, last week we did 3 sort of streams, each one of those got took down or blocked, 3 in a row, censored on YouTube, and I think one was even removed on Facebook. But it did get me a little bit back in the routine of things, and did sort of, you know, feel a bit better for doing something more productive than just sitting down in bed. But I still had a sort of couple of days afterwards where I lounged about and sort of started watching some TV shows and things of interest that keeps me sort of occupied the best I can. and before I knew it, it was sort of Wednesday, and I still hadn't really had much sleep, or that long relaxing sleep. It just been sort of catnapping and out. I don't know where it come from or why it come from, but somehow in my mind's wisdom, I decided, you know what, it'd be really good to get a good night's sleep. Why don't I go out and get some sleeping pills and do a little bit of self-medication, get myself a good night's sleep, and hopefully wake up a little bit more refreshed and recharged on Thursday in order to get back into regular productions. What I wanted to do was sort of put together Friday's presentation for the show on Thursday, then Friday I could do Saturdays, then Saturdays, Sundays. Once Sunday's finished, I can go back to my days off. But somehow in my thinking, or in my mind, I got this idea that, yeah, let's just go out and get some pills. Now, sleeping pills, as I've mentioned to you guys before, something I was dependent on for nearly 20 years. I spent 10 years of my life, 11 years in fact, my life in the UK working alternate shifts, where 1 week I'd be day shift, 1 week I'd be night shift, then I'd be back to days, and I was always in a perpetual state of jet lag. So I started taking an awful lot of sleeping pills in order to sort of get enough sleep in order to go and do 12-hour shifts in the pharmaceutical factory. But that sort of kept me for, going, I guess, through my career. And even after I sort of left that career and gave up and packed a backpack and went off to the United States and eventually ended up in Canada, I still have been unable to really sleep until quite recently without the aid of sleeping pills. And I guess, sort of not having a routine or have anything to get up for in the morning reduced a little bit of the stress and anxiety that does actually cause insomnia. The fear of not sleeping will actually cause you not to sleep, because the body will react and produce sort of toxins and stimulants, natural stimulants, to keep you awake when you are fearful, because you want to be alert and don't want to be afraid. And that same fear, or those same sort of responses, will be triggered by the fear of not sleeping. So if you've ever had insomnia, you know exactly what I am talking about. Maiden's put a little link in there. Sorry, I've not been following an awful lot to your comments, because sometimes when I do, my apologies, I'm not ignoring you. I do get a little bit sidetracked and forget what I was saying. But as I said, sleeping pills were something I was very dependent on without sort of the need to get up in the morning. And certainly through the summer months, I was sleeping, at a normal time, midnight 1, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, the latest, and getting up kind of bright and early and spending most of my days outside in the sunshine, around nature, sort of surrounded by plants and wildlife. Makes me feel good. But at the moment, I'm stuck in this little basement. Keeping myself occupied with TV shows only gets me so far, doing my sort of productions, and this does keep me a little bit busy, and also sort of puts my mind in gear and gets me thinking outside of social media news feeds, or being dumbed down or subliminally programmed via mainstream entertainment. Maiden, they make a detox spray for EMF symptoms, one symptom being insomnia. And again, this is where we're leading tonight, that we're going to look at, again, some more of the symptoms and sort of technology that can cause these symptoms, and are they the fact that maybe we do just naturally have those symptoms, or are many people being induced into having these systems? Now, another thing that also has been very much on the rise since the 1980s is drug abuse, and in particular since the rise of the 21st century, or the beginning of the 21st century, the rise of opioid abuse has been readily and commonly available. Vicodin, oxycodone. Up here in Canada, we got a fentanyl epidemic, really, is the only way you can describe it. And you can actually go, sometimes, you'll be walking around in downtown Toronto, and there'll be like a little sort of booth, first aid people, and they give you a kit to carry around with you, the pen, that if you see somebody who's having an overdose, you can jab them. And they're just giving these out to people in the public as a precautionary measure. You'll probably bump into someone who's overdosing, which is a little bit concerning. But drugs are what are used within MK Ultra programming. Again, something we've looked an awful lot at, something I've sort of kind of theorizing and concluding is the fact that social media, artificial algorithms, all of this stuff is really little more than a disguise for Monarch and MK Ultra programming, and quite a lot of the symbology and the methodology of MK is very evident, and hopefully if you've paid attention to some of these streams on the subject, you too will begin to see it. But in order for this to work, you need to do certain things. You need to be sort of a little bit distressed, shell-shocked, or traumatized by something. Many people are in shock, traumatized, distressed over what's going on with the pandemic. Many people who are stuck at home might already have a habit before they were put into this situation. Then add to that the fact that you can cause insomnia, also create opioid effects via the cellular phone using EMF and radio frequencies. This is stuff that we saw scientists talk about in show and experiment that they can do and can carry out. It exists, the technology exists. If they have this technology, why wouldn't they use it? Why go to all this trouble of putting it out? But the drug dependency, you can't go away. Even, in marijuana is considered a drug. It's legal here in Canada. Many states have legalized it. Is this part and parcel of the bigger picture and the programming? Let's legalize weed, get people stoned and just sit there, hey man, whoa, this is a great news feed. And that's the stereotypical stoner portrayal. Most of us have had a toke or two in our life, and we kind of function without behaving like Bill and Ted or Cheech or Chong. Nancy, of course, is the exception to that matter. But if you see what I'm saying, that drug abuse and drug use is widely and more commonly not necessarily acceptable, but more and more people do depend on certain drugs of choice. On top of this, things like caffeine, popularity of Starbucks and stuff. This is also a stimulant. Caffeine is categorized along with cocaine, and believe it or not, this shit that I got hooked on is in the same category as opium, heroin, and morphine. And you can just buy that over the counter, and you can get quite loaded with over the counter stuff, certainly within the sort of antihistamine and cold and flu and cough syrupy sort of categories. I'm pretty sure some of you have partied at the pharmacy before. I know I have, and to be honest, out of all the sort of drugs, I've always had a preference for pharmacy based narcotics rather than the sketchy backstreet ones, although sometimes sketchy backstreet ones are the gold seal. But nonetheless, people are dependent on drugs. People are now a little bit dependent on social media for where they gather all their information. And while in a semi-drug induced state of mind, your brain, and also added to that drug-induced state of mind, some insomnia and maybe some fear and trauma and uncertainty about what's going on, you therefore become a prime candidate for brainwashing and for mind control. Agreedness, weed, if anything, I do believe has a sort of counter effect on some of these things, and I sort of wonder what it'd be like. I mean, I don't even want to contemplate giving up weed, to be honest with you. It is one of my very few comforts and enjoyments in life, but it does sort of have reason to believe it does work as a little bit of a filter, because it does stimulate parts of the brain that they are trying to stimulate with electromagnetics. Sorry, what did I see there? Somebody said something about Netflix. Right, Nancy, I'm a night owl, and that's more people get up on exactly on, in night owls and things we talked about back in the 80s, the couch potato era, and we looked at some of the late night TV stuff in 1985 Decoded, and some of you that did watch that felt I know Laurie, for one, you were watching, you said you got a headache, and a lot of that stuff I got from archive footage that was VHS and had Dolby sound system for the effect. And during midnight hours, that was when people channel surfed, and we sort of also looked at channel surfing. That's what we did with the remote, and what we do now with our phone is no different, right? The muscle memory is there. So was this the dawn of where we are? And again, within terms of something we'll see tonight, the 7 generations of sustainability. You don't have to necessarily put this into agricultural or environmental principles. You can put this into any principle, that the effects and impacts of radical changes that you do to the first generation will have an effect on 7 generations to come. Now we're in the 5th generation of digital technology. What the fuck's it going to be like when we get to 7G, and when we look back at those brick phones that we used to have back in the 1980s, and the you know, even the flip phones now look very antiquated compared to the technology we have now. And we have given so much power to electronic dependency. You know, we can't rely on it. People have been sort of dumbed down that they don't need to read maps, they don't need to do directions. We can be led there via our electronic device. Pokemon Go, we've talked about so many times, was an experimentation, in my opinion, on a mass level of electronic farming of humanity, and how you can pick a side, either red or blue. Doesn't matter if it's for politics or Pokemon, red or blue, pick a side, choose your team. This is all part of Hegelian dialect, problem, reaction, solution. In order for the problem to work, those being manipulated need to pick a side. Stuff we've talked about, and I'm repeating. Welcome, Devil. Glad you made it. Baby P, that was for you, wherever you may be. We missed you yesterday, buddy, and I'm glad you're here, because some of the stuff we'll talk about tonight is a little bit over my understanding. But why I wanted to bring this stuff to your attention is the fact that there are minds much superior to mine, people with a lot more credentials and PhDs and academic credentials than I could ever dream of possessing, that are telling you exactly the same things that I am saying. Now, in regards to what we have got to see tonight, it's about an hour 30 minutes, a little bit longer than yesterday. Yesterday did seem to go in a blink of an eye. You didn't really miss an awful lot yesterday, Devil Speak Buddy, although we did miss you. I wasn't exactly firing on all cylinders as a result of possibly being electronically induced with the thought that it'd be a great idea to take a whole box of sleeping tablets in order to try and get myself one good night's sleep. And again, was the phone trying to get me to commit suicide, because bearing in mind, last week all 3 of my streams were blocked on YouTube, and subsequently this morning TS Prepper's Facebook account was deactivated by Facebook for posting a little picture of Adolf Hitler, and one of his quotes that a big enough lie repeated often enough will be widely accepted as the truth. Not exactly supporting Hitler, it's just a quote of reference, historical person of interest. Facebook didn't like that, give me a 30-day ban, but for some reason I was still able to post. So out of protest, I just kept posting and posting the same picture over and over again, and kept getting the same community strike standard, until it told me that your account had been deactivated. We're not allowed in you to have a Facebook log out now. So I went to log out, and then, get this shit, fucking Facebook, like desperate for attention, when I logged out, as it said that my account had been deactivated, it's like, wait, hold on, don't log out just yet. You still have a chance to appeal. Don't do anything rash. If you log out now, you won't be able to appeal, and you have the right to appeal for the next 30 days. Please don't leave just yet. And I'm like, what the fuck? You've just deactivated my account. Now you want me to fucking get on my bending knees and like, please, Facebook, give me my account back. But nonetheless, it took me 2 minutes to make another account, set up another page under TSP. Some of you may have gotten a friend request there, but the only disappointing thing about that my TS Prepper account was the sole admin to the Reality Decoded group on Facebook. So now there's no admin there at all. So that group's pretty much dead in the water and is never going to grow. So we might have to rethink there. Yeah, I'm in exactly what I've been talking about, Devil. I've been feeling very, very tired lately. Not as though I'm getting enough sleep. When I do sleep, it's not enough sleep. When I wake up, I feel more tired than when I did sleep. And, I guess, this was pretty much why I went out of my way to try and get a good sleep. But again, was that thought pattern put into my mind by our artificial friend? Welcome, Trip. Glad to see you. We are at 9 people. We haven't quite made the double digits yet, but good enough and close enough. So hopefully I am going to try and come back at you tomorrow to make up for missing Friday, so you get your 3 in a row. And what happens beyond then, I don't know. But without me boring you to death any longer, I will just take a little check at some of your comments, because they are coming in fast and furious, and it is pleasing to see there aren't as many emojis. Good job, Nancy. You're going to get a silver star at the moment. If not, you get a gold star. Stick around to the look at that. Right on cue, she puts an emoji. Remember, you've only got 10, darling. Use them sparingly. But you did say there, Nancy, that you've been feeling tired. DS has just said he's tired. I know Glynis said she's getting the rings in the ears. Martha also mentioned something about that. Yeah, and Glynis is saying weed is way better than alcohol or other recreational drugs. Netflix and now stuff easier to get now. Marijuana is magic. Yeah, I believe Abraham Lincoln said something about it being the God's given medicine or something along those lines. Now binging on a single TV show is the norm, and again, these sort of binging watching things while we're binge there and we're sort of just transfixed, we are sort of maybe subject to some subliminal programming. Talking of which, I have been watching The Abyss, not The Abyss, The Myth on Netflix, the South Korean time travel show, and I just watched the latest episode 6 yesterday, and boom, oh my god, watch this fucking show, people. It's the best show you are not watching, and the best time travel since the 80s, time travel fiction since the 80s. It brought us Terminator and Back to the Future. And very funny enough, yesterday in the latest episode 6 of The Myth, they made reference to Terminator. Brilliant stuff, guys. Really, really, I do encourage to watch it. We have done a lot of talk about time travel, and it would be kind of nice as a little group project if we could sort of all watch it together and maybe cast your opinions. But again, yesterday in episode 6, when I watched that, so much purple going on. All of these things, are they programmers? Is this part of the mind control? And just how extensive is this? Would it be as far to say as nothing isn't mind control? One way or another, they are using devices, technology, entertainment, social media, you name it, memes, emojis. All of this is part of our brainwashing control and the changing of how we once were pre-digital to how we are now digital. And again, remembering back in the 80s, still many of us were sort of without the luxury of some of these digital devices or electronics, VHS, stuff like that. Maybe one person in the street had a VHS recorder, and maybe sort of once a week they'd open the doors and, hey, come round, friends and neighbors, let's watch a movie together. I remember doing that in the early days of VHS, for sure. The purple people eater, one-eyed, one-horned purple people eater that come down out of the sky. We did do the Purple Haze stream over on TSP TV a while ago. I'm not sure if you were with us at that point, Devil Speak, but if you haven't seen it, do check it out. And I do have a little bit of a follow-up on the color purple in the future. Laurie, I gotta go, guys. Hopefully you can catch tomorrow night's Gonna Eat and try to seduce hubby. Well, good luck. Put some thigh highs on and a little garter belt, and maybe sort of some lipstick and smoker's spliff seductively. That would work for me. Guys are pretty easy to please. We don't really need much to get us going. You was back there. Okay, my apologies if I think that might have been actually around the time that you discovered us and we discovered you, and now you are very much part of the furniture in the reality crew. once known as the Thrift Fam. But nevertheless, guys, let me get the feature presentation into place, and you can listen to what I had to say. But again, be warned, somewhere during the recording of this, if or not the influences of electromagnetic frequencies were the result of my eyes going screwy and getting a little bit waylaid, I don't know, but you decide. Anyway, first and foremost, let's turn off the camera, and I am about to turn off the mic and join you in the chat. So hopefully you are situated, comfortable, got all the things you need to get through the next hour and a half. Smoke if you've got them, go and pee real quick if you need to go, and I will see you in chat right now. Okay guys, so welcome to Reality Decoded's feature presentation. In tonight's particular topic, if you don't already know by now, is weapons of mind distraction. And it is a topic we have been talking quite a lot here on Reality Decoded as recently as last week with Mind Wars, which has since been blocked on YouTube. And if not, this one will go the same route and be blocked after recording and airing or not, we will remain to be seen. But it's also something we've spoken a lot about also over on TSP TV, when the doors to the thrift store were once open, but they are now temporarily closed for the foreseeable future. And if or not they open again as a pop-up shop in the future, who knows? But here we are currently at Reality Decoded, where we're trying to sort of keep a little bit of regularity and scheduled streaming for your education and informative purposes, and some of you do even find them a little bit enjoyable. If or not tonight's content will be of an enjoyable nature or not, who knows? That just depends on what kind of mind control you may or may not be under. And we've talked, as I said, at great length about these topics, so rather than repeat what I've already said and should be familiar with you in terms of technology that we carry around in our palms of our hands, our handbags, our backpacks, have on our desktops. These are in fact not devices of communication in personal aid and to help us find tacos and directions to the supermarket, and find out if we can get an Uber to our Aunt Beryl's because she's feeling a little bit under the weather due to the fact of the coronavirus. But nonetheless, we do carry around with us a lot of electronic devices, and our households are full of what was once formerly military technology that has been repackaged, rebranded as smart, quirky, helpful. Can't live without it. How did we ever get by without these devices? But anyway, we are going to look at an article here that I find particularly fascinating and interesting. And spoiler alert, this was written 24 years ago, almost quarter of a century ago, in 1997, around the time of the dawn of 2G technology. Bear in mind, we are now at 5G, and I will bring you a little bit of information at some point in the future, if not in this presentation, about the 7 generations of sustainability. But back at the dawn of 2G, we'd up until this point had analog digital devices. We had early primitive cell phones, digital radios, digital watches, Walkmans. All these kind of gadgets were introduced to us in the 80s as part of the first generation of technology. But towards the beginning of the 21st century and the end of the 20th century, things started to get a little bit sci-fi with the launch of 2G. And this is when we started to see like little flip phones, and suddenly all of a sudden they had cameras. All of a sudden a phone needed a camera in it. But as I said, this is, as I already mentioned, a spoiler alert, written 1997 and was reprinted in 2001, then in March of 2001, just 6 months prior to that Tuesday. in September that we all are so familiar with, and was that a result of hijackers with box cutters that had been radicalized by Islam and wanted to take out their frustrations in a jihad on the Western world into iconic buildings, or was that the result of directed energy weaponry, holographic technology, and maybe electronic mind control, making the masses believe that they had in fact seen aircraft penetrate solid steel buildings? But as we said, this was originally written in 1997, nearly quarter of a century ago, and as I've been talking about in more contemporary times, electronic mind control, or e-weapons, and the victims are of four basic types, and this is what we are going to be talking about, or looking at rather, in this article, and talking about in relevance to the times that we're living in. So first, top of the list of victims of e-weapon, um, electromagnetic weaponry, electronic devices of mind control, are the guinea pigs. And spoiler alert again, guys, you and I and each and every one of us are a guinea pig to the elite. We all are a test subject with our own little individual artificially intelligent handler that reports all of its findings back to the powers to be. We also have corporate whistleblowers and workers' comp claimants who claims expose corporate misdeeds. So this is people that maybe worked in the agency, or within, certain government organizations that have sort of seen the light of day and decided that they can no longer keep quiet and blow whistles. But bear in mind, guys, something I do mention time and time again is nobody blows whistles that ain't meant to be heard. But sometimes these people do get disposed of if they do blow whistles too loudly. Pleasure objects for surveillance, and e-weapon holders who are sexual perverts. I'm guessing that is sort of the Hollywood elites, not Hollywood elites, like the Hollywood sort of crowd, the actors and pop stars and stuff like this, who become objects of desire to the common folk. Unlucky slobs who have inadvertently pissed off the wrong person at the wrong time, and that might be something that is happening in today's um, times, that you might piss off the Community Standard Bureau, or the Big Brother always watching Google alert moderators that don't like to have things that will be disruptive to the community and might upset some people of a sensitive nature. These people, could maybe trigger the algorithm in them. Maybe you said or posted something wrong, that they might give you a little dose of electromagnetic weaponry to punish you for your misdoings. But today's e-weapon guinea pigs are fundamentally different from the old style institutional and child abused MK Ultra, another subject we're talking about extensively at TSP TV, and a little bit here at Reality Decoded. And the institutionalizing of MK Ultra and the experimentation on the individual was indeed part and parcel of, if we can control one, how can we control 10? How can we control 100? How can we control everybody? And some of those methodologies of MK Ultra that become Project Monarch, also known as Project Artichoke. Some of these methods, I do strongly believe, have been repackaged and relaunched into digital form, and now, as I said, our little artificial intelligent handlers in our cellular devices can distribute whatever mind control that is required, depending on the data that you feed it. But the old MK Ultra victims, in that the torturers never used to come face to face with their victims. We don't come face to face with our handler, as it's an artificial intelligent entity, not a being. But tracking and telemetry have reached science fiction levels. Again, this was back in 1997, of efficiency, and I can tell you from 7 years of personal experience, this is the words of the author, these guys in adjacent apartments to mine can tell you the diameter of each nostril even when I am sleeping in sheet metal steel cocoon, which even when the side door is open nearly blocks all AM and FM radio signals. So again, these people are not who are being victims to this electronic magnetic frequencies, and these e-weapons are no longer people that have been dragged off to secret locations in laboratories like Montauk. They are people that are sitting on the couch next to you, sitting on the bus, the streetcar, the subway. Everywhere in society, people are plugged in to their e-weapons. And the technology now from 25 years ago is it is grown exponentially. So today's e-weapons victims zatch and torture you through walls and floors with silent weapons which cause enough pain to force suicide and still leave not a single physical trace. The weapons don't even budge my very ferocious sheet steel cocoon, even while the spooks move objects, conductive and non conductive, within the enclosure. So back then he's saying that they have the ability to spy on him, even though he is cocooned allegedly within steel walls. And 25 years ago, they were listening and had the ability to see the diameter of his nostrils. Now we have cellular devices that are activated by facial recognition. And again, back in 1997, he was saying that today's e-weapons fall into two main classes. Number one is the old fashioned pulsed microwave radar like weapons, which can transmit voices into your skull. No receiver or implant required. Bear in mind, in contemporary times, Bill Gates and Elon Musk are promoting and pushing for their neural implant technology devices. But back in 97 you didn't even need the receiver implant, so is that like kind of a placebo effect, or maybe just gives you an extra dose of Manchurian programming? But all these things all these and do other things like bathe you in a perpetual itch which causes you to scratch down to the point of bleeding without relief and cause the sensation of hot needles in any body part, with the genitalia preferred. Some victims are subjected to simple brute force master burning of their skin. Yesterday, during the stream that we did on Saturday, the 6th of March, at time of recording, I mentioned and highlighted that I had a little bit of a spot on the top of my head that felt very, very, very much like sunburn, and that I had also been sort of feeling a weird sort of sensation of congestion in sort of puffy face and puffy eyes, for a better description, on the left side of my head, as well as getting sort of some very weird and wonderful headaches. Not wonderful at all, almost migraine like. And that was the case yesterday. After I finished the stream, I sort of settled down, got up by the supper, took a shower, put my PJs on, gone into bed, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I got a throbbing pain in the left side of my head, as well as a very sort of irritating pins and needly sensation in the spot that feels like sunburn on the top of my head. So if that is coincidental or if that is psychosomatic symptoms, I do not know, but there is a strike coincidence with what they're saying there 25 years ago to what I experienced less than 24 hours ago. But the new fashioned weapons, which use signal types that are probably known to unclassified science, these include the precise through the wall and through sheet steel CAT scanning equipment, and most strikingly, the remote manipulation equipment. I would also class the ability to energize unplugged appliances and to interrupt current in an AC line cord without actuating any switches, as this second generation class of e-weapons, and this was, as I said, the dawn of 2G, when we started to have cellular phones that had a lot more sort of gadgets and things on them that you didn't really think a phone would need, to be in all honesty. But all of a sudden, the purpose of the phone was the secondary function of the phone, and the phone become the device device that brought you all your electronic news and social media apps and stuff like this. It is already just a way of data collecting your personal thoughts and opinions. Um, and run it through various algorithms. But back in 1997, the current spooks can force you to dream about anything they damn well want you to, and you can either stay awake or dream as they want. No other choices available. Right now, they force dreams of me cutting cables, 3D, vivid color, and also forcibly. All I need to do is be horizontal with my eyes closed, not asleep. More than the forced dream, they involuntarily manipulate my hands to perfectly imitate the motion being dreamed about. Interesting stuff there. Um, Certainly dreams are things that are often a little bit bizarre and hard to understand or even explain sometimes, but are they the product of our subconscious relaying things, or are they the product of electromagnetic influence? But this is only a personal opinion, and again, this is the opinion of the author that I am just reciting to you for information and educational purposes. An article that was written 25 years ago about the dangers of e-weapons, and the fact that e-weapons are sort of hidden away within our cellular devices. Also, I think it was either the early 90s or the late 80s, forgive me, I should probably know. There was a very interesting movie that came out called Maximum Overdrive, or Override, one of the two. But it kind of depicted a little sort of roadhouse diner gas station in the middle of the desert that all of a sudden all the electronic gadgets started to come to life and try to kill the humans. And again, let's not forget the Terminator movies that were popular in the 1980s that sort of depicted robots and machines coming back to hunt humans. The Terminators don't look as cool as the ones in the movies. They look just like iPhones and Android devices. And are they terminating us slowly with their rays, killing us softly in our dreams? But overcome the protective potential difference across cell walls, which are caused by bodily electrolytes ionizing, where the cautions and anions diffuse through the cell walls at different rates. This causes tiny fluctuations in temperature and nerve cells at the rate of a pulse. The thermal effect seems to be the preferred theory in the lay press, at least, and it's backed up by the rare articles by the guys who started this whole mess, like Ross Addy and Eldon Bird and others. But remember, this applies to the first generation weapons, and this was maybe the dawn of the digital era, when things like digital watches and maybe clock radios that we had by the side of our bed did give us our wake up call while we're asleep. Who knows what those digital waves were doing to our minds? And B, we haven't got a clue what signal type the second generation weapons will use. But over the past couple of years, these suggestions have been made that one, it would be a multiple low powered microwave transmitter aimed at the victim and driven in sync by a master modulator. And that multiple low powered microwave transmitter is your cell phone, guys, your iPad, your laptop, all of these things. Pretty much anything that is smart technology is exactly what they are describing them. Um, and driven by a master modulator, it then can multiple paths overcome noise and result in a kind of resonance that sets off biological responses. Is this the ringing in our ears that we are constantly hear? The second way would be two massers aimed at the victim, driven at identical frequency. Here, one masser is pulled like pulling a crystal oscillator at a bioeffective ELF stroke VLF rate, and the other strays on the center frequency. This could force ELF VLF like signals to dissipate into the target's body while remaining in a tightly focused beam otherwise. This would probably require an open air path from transmitter to victim, Wi-Fi, cellular data systems, this sort of stuff. And I would imagine the average masonry wall, depending on frequency, would cause dispersion of the signal at the wall. But if the signals are lower in the gigahertz range, perhaps they can reach the victim. I certainly don't have the money to experiment, but it might be worth a try. Now, bear in mind, guys, this is bearing sort of using antennas and satellites and stuff that are on the outside of our houses, not being able to penetrate. We have these devices in the palm of our hands, never without being in arm's reach for the most of the time. But the publicized experiment of more than a decade ago, so this was back in the 1980s, and remember, we did look at some stuff during 1985 Decoded, and also refreshed that in the Mind War stream, some information in documentaries that were shown on CNN, with the possibility that the technology already existed to control the minds of the entire population of the United States. And that goes to say that you could probably, with the same technology that is worldwide, control the minds of everybody on the planet Earth. But as we said, what's going on there? Back to the article, a publicized experiment of more than a decade ago, which was back in the 1980s, where a university biology lab connected EEG machines to plants and monitored the traces while in another building across the campus. A jar of brine shrimp was dumped in boiling water. The result, the EEG traces went wild exactly as the brine shrimp died. Experiment conducted by Cleve Baxter. I think we've actually mentioned this in one of the other previous electromagnetic mind control streams in the past here, but this was reported and recorded in the book The Secret Life of Plants, and it suggests that all sorts of living things are linked to all other living things. Principle a little like the Indian idea of everything having a soul. This was not classified and it was said to be repeatable. I just can't remember where now, and that is the author. But physicists have also fairly recently come up with a similar theory that says more or less to how, with the speed of light, all points in the universe are aware of all other points instantaneously. I don't know what the name of that theory is, but it has appeared in a Scientific American magazine article a few years ago. And again, that was recently, at a time of writing in 1997 part. Pardon me for that one there. I was thinking about the 80s again. But the theory was enhanced when a beam of light was split into two parallel beams. One beam was prismed off to the left of the prism, and the other was prismed off to the right. The beam to the left was either polarized or had some property altered, and the right beam, however, did not have any alterations. But apparently, this property is pulsated as always conserved like momentum is. Can't remember which property. Again, the words of the author there, and this might be something our dear friend Devil Speak will be a little bit more familiar with. It is kind of a little bit scientifically above my capacity to fully understand, but I do kind of get the basic theory of what they are saying. So basically, what happened is one beam had alterations, the other beam didn't, but somehow the beam that didn't have any alterations followed in suit of the beam that did, and both become had its property X had spontaneously jumped to the equal and opposite value to the left beam, maintaining its conservation. That's very hard for me to understand, so excuse me if you didn't understand. But maybe go back and read it again to yourself without me. You can turn the sound down and maybe pause it and understand it better. But basically, it's kind of like putting a beam into the left side of the brain and a beam into the right side of the brain. That might be something that can be done via your headphones if you plug your buds in. And if you do notice that your earbuds are also labeled L and R. That one is for the left side and one is for the right side, and is that purposely? Should it really matter what's, if you've got two earbuds playing the same sound, does it matter which side you put it in? And why don't you try experiment putting them back to front and see if you feel any weird symptoms in the opposite side of your head by doing so? But there was no electromagnetic way, apparently, that the left beam could have influenced the right beam, yet somehow the right beam knew about the left beam's transformation. So all very scientifically advanced for most common folk like you and I. But let's just understand that this sort of technology and experimentation has been done over a quarter of a century ago, and now this was the dangers regarding the launch of 2G, and we're now at 5G. So just imagine what they can do 25 years on. Bear in mind, in 1997, it was only 30 or something years prior that man allegedly stepped foot on the moon. But nevertheless, it is just possible that the spooks have uncovered whatever makes this theory tick, and therefore doesn't even need to worry about shielding, because shielding in this type of transmission mode is irrelevant. And this is what we're saying, that they've uncovered the fact that they can put this into cellular technology that we carry around with us, and they can beam and target at us all day, every day, if they want, with electromagnetic beams. There is also a theoretical type of field which physicists call the scalar field. If I'm saying that right, forgive me if I'm not. And there's lots of chatter that this might be the mode to use in the second generation weapons. We've got fifth generation weapons now, guys. Some internet authors of unknown qualifications have proposed that a scalar field can be generated in the bioeffective range by driving two air core coils with a common axis and a shape, so that one coil's magnetic field exactly cancels the other field, leaving net zero magnetic field. But this allegedly uncovers a residual scalar field. Um, Again, very complicated stuff. And the author goes on to say that he has seen articles that claim that frequency is quite low, ELF, extra low frequency, and the power of this ELF modulation envelope is so biologically effective it can cause wild sensations to any observer within a few feet. And as we just said, we've never really got our cellular devices without a few feet of grasp away from us. They're always there to be able to pick up without having to stretch or get up and move to them. Sometimes we just keep them in our lap, in our pockets. Some ladies even tuck them in their cleavage. And back to the article, and of course we can't leave out the much vaunted Hutchinson effect, where Hutchinson in the mid 60s in British Columbia, Canada, had a lab full of Tesla apparatus which caused outdoor power poles to wave back and forth, properties of nearby aluminium to change such that a section through the metal revealed embedded unburned wood, etc. Sorry, did I read that right? I don't know what's going on. My eyes have gone a little bit ski-whiff, and maybe they're beaming me right now for trying to read this and inform you of it with some of these deadly rays in weapons of mind distraction as I speak. But apologies if I am making a little bit of a not so much sense of this article, but it is getting hard to read. But if I had any equally strange experiences myself for the past 7 years, I'd discount this, but I can't discount it. Now we have one victim, Mary Ritz, researching this. She doesn't work and has the time. Now, this spring, 1997, an article in the US News and World Report, Alden Bird, an ex-Navy e-weapon developer, stated that his version of the e-weapon could cause dramatic effects on living organism while having a signal too small to detect. I have a room full of detectors which worked for a few minutes, then not at all, because the spooks detected their presence and switched transmission modes. One is a simple Radio Shack stereo equalizer with the range capacitors 100 times the original value, giving a range of roughly zero point 0.3 Hz to 160 Hz, right in the thick of the alleged bioeffective frequencies. I tried driving it with a tin can horn and a hot carrier diode from a center conductor to the opposite side of the can on the advice of a local radar maintenance supervisor, also a radio ham. And the first time that the author switched it on, the spooks transmitted me an absolute pure 5 hertz signal for about 10 seconds, turned it off for about a minute, and then another 5 hertz signal for 10 seconds, then nothing. Since, including observation while my body was full of hot needle in flesh sensations. While he was observing it, he had hot sensations of needles in his flesh. This tells me Eldon Bird's comment about the undetectability is probably right on the mark. I'd love to have a half hour with Bird and Aldi. Is that Aldi or Albi? Yeah, I don't know. Strapped to a gurney and a sodium pentanol drips going. We'd learn some really interesting stuff, I betcha. I don't know how to contact those individuals. One is semi-retired at the VA hospital at Loma Linda and won't answer calls or faxes. Dr. Michael Persinger is doing quite a bit of experimentation on the effects of magnetic fields on human subjects. He's somebody we have also spoken about a couple of times in regard to this subject previously at Reality Decoded and TSP TV. But he was conducting the experimentation on the effects of magnetic field on human subjects using Radio Shack read relays with the core removed and driven at various ELF VLF wave shapes. With a double-ended plus minus 5-volt power supply, Dr. Persinger is decent in that he at least acknowledges that e-weapons exist, but is having too good a time up there in his Sudbury, Ontario retreat to jump into the e-weapons fray. Another individual, Doctors Elizabeth Rolsher and Bill Van Bice, again, my eyes have gone completely screwy here, guys, are living partly on Elizabeth's family jewelry, having had a very rough time after their heyday in early electromagnetic research, which assisted in the development of e-weapons. Very nice folks on the phone, but they have had to sell most of their test equipment just to eat. But there you have it, guys. This is what the author is saying. Where this mess stands at the moment for your benefit, Jim Steve is telling it like it is. No exaggeration. I am in contact with about 50 others and 50 witnesses with consistent stories rates as proof in anyone's courts. Finally, the above info tells you why 5,000 worth of t-shirts saying ban electronic weapons and MK Ultra continues, and the make the world safe for our children would put us light years ahead of even the best technical survey. Not sure what he's meaning there. But maybe spreading awareness to this subject back then might have prevented us getting to 5G, possibly in hindsight. But all you have to do is wiggle a line on a piece of paper. Do you expect this jury to believe that this is a weapon? A general harassment signal trace could be shot down by a good high school debating team. As I said, it's very, very hard to point a finger and prove without a doubt that these electronic weapons are in fact our cellular devices that we carry around with us at all times and are never without a few feet of our reach. And despite the fact all of this information in recent times in articles like this from over a quarter of a century ago almost, suggesting that this technology exists and they have the capacity to order and control the minds and use these electromagnetic frequencies as weapons against us, why on earth wouldn't they use it? And if, as we said, they had the capability back in the 80s, and in the 80s this was also on the back of years of extensive research, where on earth in 2021 is this technology, and do we really truly want to know how deadly and powerful it is, and what a hold it really has over each and every one of us human beings? Right, so here we are with another article from more recent times, although it was still 3 years ago, 2018, that this was written. US intelligence accidentally leaks documents on electromagnetic mind control weapons, and this is from a website called The Mind Unleashed. And there's a pretty cool picture that could also be a thumbnail, may even be a thumbnail. I don't know. Let's see if I figure that out or not before I finish editing up. But there's a little kind of depiction, I guess, of the world, the mind, what the world is like in the mind of the individual, and the fact that it's being beamed and constructed via frequencies, if you want to interpret that. And no, we're not going to share it on Facebook or tweet it, but I am going to read it to you. And if you want to do some further looking into this, you can, or if you choose to share it, although I doubt you really want to or will, not a problem. You have no obligation to hit the bell, smash the like, or share any of my material, but I do appreciate comments and constructive feedback. But Curtis Waltman, a journalist with the document leaking website Merck Rock, recently received a response to a Freedom of Information Act request that he filed with the Washington State Fusion Center, a multi agency counterterrorism center. His request was pertaining to the current culture war between Antifa and alt-right groups, and he did receive numerous documents associated with those searches. However, he also got some additional files that he didn't ask for, and they may actually be the most interesting. For seemingly no reason, a document called EM Effects on Human Body also found its way into the file that Waltman received, and inside was various diagrams showing how human minds can be controlled remotely using electromagnetic frequencies. The diagrams were not made by the Fusion Center, but were actually taken from an article published in the Australian magazine Nexus in 2006. And the article was about a 1992 lawsuit that was filed against the NSA by a man named John Sinclair Acui. He claimed that the agency was harassing him using remote psychological devices, and he also claimed in his lawsuit that the NSA has the ability to assassinate US citizens covertly or run covert psychological control operations to cause subjects to be diagnosed with ill mental health. Or maybe in 2021, these electromagnetic weapons of mind control and psychological control could be diagnosed with having COVID-19. That's what I'm telling you guys. Pay attention to your Uncle TSP. But the editor at Nexus attempted to reach Acui, or however you say that, about the lawsuit, but he was not willing to speak on any details about the case. And this is a quote: "I tried ringing Mr. Acui to find out what was the outcome, if any, of his court case. He firmly but kindly told me that he could not speak about anything to do with the case over the phone and hung up." So whether he was paid off to shut up, or was in fear of what he might say because what of the electromagnetic weapons might do to him next. But the diagrams below were used as evidence in the case, and while he did say that he did not make them, he would not reveal where they came from. The exact origin of these diagrams are unknown, but it is very strange that the Washington State Fusion Center, which was formed long after the lawsuit, is keeping these types of documents in their files. I'm going to try and zoom it in for you now, guys, and see if we can navigate this the best we can. So, fuck off. Yes, it's weird, the website, but masts and individual remote control via the mobile phone network and mobile phones is the top picture, and that is a little kind of demonstration of, I guess, the 5G, 4G, 3G, 2G towers there, and there they are emitting beams to the minds of those that are surrounding them. And if we come down to this, individual remote mind control via mobile psychotronic weapon carriers disguised as communication vehicles, maybe UPS or FedEx vehicles, or dare I even say our good buddy Cali Ninja. He drives an Amazon truck. You're always running into these on the road at any given day in particular traffic conditions. Sure as sure can be, you're going to see one of those, post office trucks and stuff like this as well. Who knows? Uber, sometimes Uber drivers now, in it, skip the dishes delivery drivers, they have a little sort of decal things like taxis that they used to put in the front of their car to let you know that they are an Uber driver. Are these devices of electromagnetic weaponry? Individual and group remote control via black helicopter carrying psychotronic weapons. Quite a few of us have said they've heard helicopters buzzing around over their towns and cities in recent weeks and months. Also here in Toronto, we do see a few more helicopters than before. I mean, we do sort of around sort of rush hour. See the travel copters, the news agencies, they're out and about, sort of, keeping an eye on the roads and things. But I do hear a lot more helicopters fluttering around daily, it seems, more frequently than before. Individual remote mind control via transportable cytronic weapons, and this is our phones, guys. This is where it comes in to play. The portable cytronic weapons we've been given, and we've volunteered, and we've given all the permissions that have been asked, and we grant everything to these powers to be with the technology and capability to use electromagnetic frequencies on us. We allow them to do so by agreeing to the terms and conditions when we install applications or we get a new cellular device and we put our details in. We are asked to agree to the terms of conditions. And there was a better picture of the helicopter zapping the mines below. Good God. That is very small and blurry at the best of times, and with my eyes going ski with. But you can see there, they have sort of the hertz frequencies that the brain functions on. The visual cortex, for example, is 25 hertz. The motor control cortex is 10 hertz. Auditory cortex 15. I can't read that, so it's far too blurry. Thought carrier, or the thought center, which is the important one, is 20 megahertz there. And this is what they can do with those frequencies. They can information induce thought modulation with the first one. Motor impulse coordination, that can kind of make you, I guess, or feel a bit dizzy or drowsy, or we heard about the opioid effect, and that might give you a little bit of a relaxed sensation or maybe an agitated sensation. Sound which bypasses the ears. We're always talking about the ringing in our ears. Is this what is that? Is this what that is? Images in the brain bypassing the eyes. Again, this is maybe implanting stuff to our dreams, perhaps. Phantom touch sensor, sort of feeling like you've got an itch or a scratch or someone's touched you, would be the other one. An example, I guess. And the last one here is imposed subconscious thoughts. Let me get that big. Is that imposed? Yeah, that's very, very blurry. But imposed subconscious thoughts. So with 20 megahertz, you can control the thoughts and insert the thoughts into your brain. Um, Remote mind control, remote brain watching, brain mapping. Sorry, I'm trying to read this through very squinted eyes for your enjoyments. The things I do for the 6 or 7 of you that are tuned in watching right now. We may be lucky to have 11 watching. But emissions or wave propagation electronic signal to make communication to identify any object emitting frequency. Human bodies emit a very low electronic signal as temperature, heat, brain waves, delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma, etc. Bioelectromagnetic field, which is unique for every human body. This is the electronic signal frequency idea of every object. So basically, our cell phones can kind of ID our very exclusive, unique, like our fingerprints, electronic map, and then it has the ability to disrupt and alter that frequency that which we live in. And the radar electronic signal detected the object human body for modulation of the human brainwave. Signal detecting radar equipment. So, we mentioned about the Doppler radar system being a little bit of a weapon. Um, and there's a little diagram there. So if you kind of imagine that individual in its back pocket as an iPhone or an Android device that we all seem to have, probably you're watching on right now, this kind of shows how it can create a little electromagnetic field around your personal living space. And in current times, under the COVIDian doctrine and draconian tyrannical measures to keep us safe from a 99% survival rate virus, we're told to stay 6 feet apart from other individuals. And is this because they can alter and control everybody's immediate environment within a 6 feet radius, and your personal brain control frequencies and functions won't get into somebody who's 6 feet away. They will get their own program and you will get your program. And if we get a little bit too close, maybe, like in Ghostbusters, crossing the streams, you might get a little bit of disruption in your programming. There's some stuff about the human brainwave, and the frequencies that they operate on. And what does that say? Sporadic Saha and software. Now, here is a little diagram of the human body. And again, my apologies because it's a bit difficult to navigate and magnify. It's very small to see on the screen. But this is some of the stuff that it can do, right? Once you tune in these frequencies, and maybe you've got the individual's personal electronic footprint, for want of a better description, you can then alter it, and you can add things like forced memory, blanking, and induced erroneous actions. You can induce changes to hearing, both apparent direction and volume, and sometimes even content. Sudden violent itching inside the eyelids, forced manipulation of airwaves, including controlled forced speech, wildly racing heart without a cause, something I've experienced in recent weeks and months, some weird chest palpitations and am I about to have a heart attack type conditions that have been a little bit alarming, but I put it down to sort of a little bit of grief, anxiety, depression, that kind of stuff. But let's not rule out the fact that it could be induced electromagnetically. Remotely induced violent no rash itching with preference for hard to reach areas, often during delicate or messy work. So something I sometimes used to notice in the kitchen, if ever I had my hands like in a salad, or I was mixing some dough, or sticking chicken on a skewer, for example. I'd always sort of have an itch on my face, or maybe my balls would be itchy. I don't know if you noticed stuff like that. And I also sort of kind of noticed that, every time I sort of seem to want to go to sleep, I need to piss every 2 seconds, but don't need to piss when I don't need to sleep, it seems. Um, but forced nudging of arm during delicate or messy work causing injuries in spills. Something I've also had difficulty doing in recent weeks and months is roll a spliff that smokes normally. I do smoke a lot of rolling. I smoke a lot. I do roll my own spliffs. I mix tobacco and marijuana together for medicinal purposes, not necessarily recreational anymore. And I have been doing so since I was a teenager. Like, I can roll with my eyes shut, but recently I cannot roll a spliff that doesn't burn down one side while the other side of the spliff remains completely intact. Becky Pamplin, if you're watching, you can confirm this because I've sent you some videos and some pictures of it. A little bit of a phenomenon that I thought maybe I shouldn't share this with you, but I am sharing you now because it does seem a little bit bizarre. Special attention to the genital area, itching, forced orgasm, or intense pain. I sometimes do feel like someone's stuck a steaming hot needle up my japsai on occasion, sort of get a sort of, oh my god, where did that come from sensation in my groin. Intense general pain, or hot needles pushed deep inside the flesh. Sensations. I actually do have a foreign object in my leg anyway that is metal that feels quite unpleasant, but I do get lots of pain in my knees and ankles. Also, a wild flailing, sometimes followed by short periods of rigor mortis. Like, sometimes when you get, do they call it a Charlie horse, where you get a dead leg and all of a sudden you sort of get pins and needles and you have to sort of bring your leg back to life, that sort of stuff. Uh, the feet can be affected a neurocontrol by bending each toe backwards almost 90 degrees at one time over a couple of minutes. Let's go to the other side. And now these pictures, if you've just seen there, come from 1974, apparently, these diagrams. They can read and broadcast thoughts. They can control dreams. They can force waking visions, some synced with body motions. Microwave hearing, transparent eyelids, artificial tinnitus, that's the ringing in the ears, always feeling that, always. I'm sure some of you will agree, and I know some of you have also mentioned you've got a frequent ringing in the ears. Um, Forced movement of the jaw and the clenching of teeth, forced muscle quaking of the large muscles on the back, forced precision manipulation of hands, sometimes synced to the forced waking visions. Um, the first unclassified successful transmission of the human voice directly into the skull of a living person was performed by Joseph C. Sharp of the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research in 1974 by transmitting a hypnotest voice using the low silent sound, or I can't read that, something scramble method used in the Gulf War. It is possible to hypnotize a target without the target being awake, from hiding, levitating from hiding and leaving trace evidence. My apologies, that was difficult to read, as all of this part is. But general effects of electromagnetic sensitivity, or weapon attacks on the individual, can be as follows: sudden overheating, all over body pain, forced caffeine field, sleep prevention. I'm struggling with sleep recently. Forced drop in your tracks, sleep indictment. And again, that's something else. I sort of don't sleep, and then all of a sudden I get, oh my god, I just have to lie down and sleep right now, only to sort of be wide awake once I hit the pillow. Goodness, This wording is getting incredibly difficult to read. The longer I do tend to be looking at the screen, the worse my eyesight gets. And again, is this some of the effects that I'm talking about being used on me by my own personal electromagnetic weapon, portable weapon technology that I'm carrying around in my hand at the moment that I am recording the presentation you're currently watching on. Um, Forced caffeine field, forced drop in your track sleep, inducement, irresistible go here, go there command, microwave burns, like mentioned yesterday and also previously in this stream, that I do have a spot on the top of my head that feels like I've got sunburn. And in particular, when I shave my head with a razor, it does feel very, very sensitive when I touch it. Involuntary test subjects also experience frequent break and enters at home and at work, with clothing and furniture, business paper, computer files being sabotaged, modified, or stolen. Psychological warfare research is the likely motive. Psychoelectric weapon effects are what we just looked at. Sorry for that, guys. It was very hard to read, and this isn't exactly much better either. But most of the government mind control programs that exist are kept secret, but there is one that managed to draw the attention of the public, and that was good old MK Ultra, a CIA operation that you should be all too familiar with. If you do tune in regularly to TSP TV and Reality Decoded, you should be able to tell me all about MK Ultra. But for those of you that don't pay as much attention or are unknown, the MK Ultra was a CIA operation that involved very extreme methods of mind control that were tested on the US population. Although the CIA was forbidden to carry out tests on their own citizens, they did so anyway and kept the whole operation classified. And we've also talked about Tavistock Institute. The Tavistock touch is far and wide, people. Everybody's been touched by Tavistock. Their prime induction to the scene was their research on victims of World War I mind control, and how shell-shocked victims were so much more susceptible to mind control than people that hadn't been subjected to traumatic psychological events. That we are now currently sort of living in a psychological traumatic event for a lot of people. But the project began in April 53, just 6 years after the formation of the CIA, and was among the most top secret government operations there was. There were 150 sub-projects within the MK Ultra program, and many involved advanced brainwashing techniques using psychological drugs. Is our psychological drug of choice that they're using for mind control manipulation today dopamine? That is something you get from a post that gets liked by some of your friends, or maybe if you post a meme and somebody shares that meme, you get a little bit of dopamine. So you go out of your way to maybe share another meme to get some more dopamine. And this is a little bit how they use drugs to manipulate the minds. Our cellular devices, social media, very, very commonly and popularly and widespread are reports that tell you all about the dopamine effect and how they use certain sort of methods used in casinos, in particular, like the slot machine, to distribute your dopamine on regular intervals. But anyway, the drugs, sensory deprivation was also one of the things, stopping people sleep, making them hungry, loud noises, all of this kind of stuff. I'm not sleeping great. Don't know if some of you guys are also not sleeping great, ringing in the ears, weird sensations, palpitate, all of this stuff. And importantly, the last one was electroshock therapy. Are we getting electroshocks from our cellular devices? Maybe. But after 20 years of testing harsh brainwashing methods on unsuspecting US citizens, Some of these victims of these tests began asking questions about what had happened to them while they were under the care of doctors that were on the CIA's payroll. Fearing exposure, the Pentagon ordered the MK Ultra program to be terminated and all documents destroyed. However, lots and lots and lots of stuff about MK has surfaced since. In 1973, the CIA director and chief architect of MK Ultra, Richard Helms, followed through with destroying the evidence, but some of the papers were misfiled and overlooked. Just a few years later, those misfiled papers would come back to haunt the Pentagon as they would expose some of the harsh realities behind the MK Ultra program. After this evidence surfaced, dozens of victims came forth claiming to be test subjects in MK Ultra experiments. Maybe if we have experienced some of the symptoms that we just read about, maybe we could file claims against the US government or the Canadian government or the British government as victims of MK Ultra. Imagine a class action lawsuit against the United States government by every single individual living within the United States claiming they had been the victim of mind control weaponry. That would be an interesting case to say the least. Move over OJ. This is a new kid on the block in terms of sensational blockbuster event court cases. But the most recent lawsuits against the CIA for the brainwashing experiments is by far the largest. 3 veterans groups in the state of California have brought a case against the CIA claiming that over 78,000 soldiers were used as human guinea pigs to research biological, chemical, and psychological weapons and in 2010, a federal judge in San Francisco finally ordered the CIA to produce specific records of the experiments that they controlled on those thousands of soldiers from 1950 through to 75, 25 years. Um, the agency has been backpedaling for the last 20 years, claiming that the details of the MK Ultra program are state secrets and a matter of national security. Of course, it's national security. They don't want the public to know that their minds are being controlled by the likes of the CIA, NSA, in government agencies with alphabet acronyms. Um, they have tried every trick in the book to avoid exposure in this case, even saying that the experiments in question happened so long ago that they can't legally be held accountable for what happened. Terms of limitation or statute of limitation, is that what it's called? Many people are naive enough to believe that the government mind control experiments are a thing of a past, but that is limited to MK Ultra. But this one program is likely just scratching the surface of what is actually taking place. And this is what I'm saying, guys. Are our cellular devices, in fact, the robotic terminators that were predicted in the 80s? They just weren't as cool as the Arnold Schwarzenegger one that we were grow to love because of his catchphrases of "I'll be back, hasta la vista, baby." But they did warn us in the 80s and in the 90s of impending doom from machines. And we were also told and warned of robots in disguise, people. We have robots in disguise, but they don't have laser guns or lightsabers or any cool weapons like that. No, no, no. They have hidden silent weapons that can't be detected, can't be located, and are very, very hard to prove that they are, in fact, weapons at all. But if you want to believe that your cellular device is just your friendly, helpful electronic aid that makes your life that little much more easier by having so, then you believe that lie if you choose. As Costanza says, it's not a lie if you believe it. But if you want to believe that maybe, just maybe, there is a possibility that some of what we have been looking at with regards to electromagnetic mind control, frequency, weapons of mind distraction are being used against us. If one of these little tiny pieces of evidence is true, then who's to say it isn't all true? And something we mentioned yesterday, that if this didn't exist, it had to be created. And who is the creator of such conspiracies and stories and fundamental exploration in experimentation research as we are seeing? That is, we can piece together with these conspiracies. It all had to come from somewhere. If it didn't exist, all of this had to be created. So is it fabrication or is it fact? Anyway, moving on, let's go and have a little look at the seven generations of sustainability to see if that makes any more sense in any of what we've been saying, although I'm pretty sure not so much. Here we are at Wikipedia, where we are going to look briefly at the seven generation sustainability ideology. Um, Seven generation stewardship is a concept that urges the current generation of humans to live and work for the benefit of the seventh generation in the future. It is believed to have originated with the Iroquois, Great Law of the Iroquois, which holds appropriate to think seven generations ahead. So basically, anything that is implemented to society within the first generation will have impact, could have a beneficial or unbeneficial impact on the children of the seventh generation to follow. And why I'm talking about this and why I've mentioned this briefly before is that I kind of believe that this sort of methodology of the Iroquois and the seven generations of sustainability is something that is being used in regards to the digital era that we are living in, and the fact that the dawn of first G digital technology back in the 1980s, late 70s, was around for around a decade, and then we went to the second generation when we suddenly seen, you could hook your phone up to the internet, although it's very, very crude. It wasn't like it is today, but you also had cell phones that come with photographic devices. You had a camera built into them, and some of them even had like sort of GPS in their infancy. Um, and is the impact of the generation of first digital technology going to have a unbeneficial or beneficial effect on the seventh generation of individuals or humans that grow up in the seventh generation of digital technology? We are currently in the dawn of 5G. That was sort of launched around last year. They were warning us it was coming. It's here now. It also sort of coincided conveniently with COVID-19. And as you are aware, or should be aware by now, if you've been following along these electromagnetic stream themed streams on Reality Decoded and TSP TV, you should know all too well that the symptoms of electromagnetic frequency sensitivity are almost, or in fact are, identical to the symptoms they are telling you that are the result of catching COVID-19. That is, of course, if you catch the COVID-19 that has symptoms. You might be one of the individuals that catches the COVID that doesn't have symptoms if you're lucky, but there is a strain of it that's worse than the flu. With conveniently and coincidentally the same exact symptoms as that of electromagnetic frequency, the thing that is transmitted via the 5G towers and is delivered and distributed via cellular devices. But they hold it appropriate to think seven generations ahead. So were they thinking seven generations ahead of the impact of digital technology on humanity when they launched it in the 80s? Probably they did. And bear in mind, if they do in fact have technology such as the looking glass that gives them the ability to see into the future, to see what outcome their introduction of digital technology back in the 80s would have by the time it reached 7G, then you would probably go without saying that it was a success. And as to why we are already at the fifth generation of that seven generations of digital sustainability. Are we going to be sustained entirely in a digital environment by the time we get to 7G? But anyway, I digressed a little bit there. It's frequently associated with the modern popular concept of environmental stewardship or sustainability, and is something that you will find in amongst the principles or the methods that are being suggested as part of the United Nations Agenda 2030, that was formerly known as Agenda 21 in its concept, which was the agenda for a sustainable development for the 21st century. But it's so far ahead of the game in 2015, if you know what, we can have the job done by 2030. So are we closer and closer to that United Nations dystopia of one world leadership under the guise of sustainable development? Well, our little Greta Thunberg youth clone army will be marching around the streets, rounding up people who don't believe in that, a little bit like they did back in the days of the Third Reich. Berlin, Germany, they rounded up anybody that sort of went against National Socialism and took them off to re-education camps. And bear in mind, in contemporary times, people, we have quarantine camps that are run by good old FEMA, that also run a little bit hand in glove with the United Nations. But in every deliberation, we must consider the impact on the seventh generation, even if it requires having skin as thick as the bark of a pine. And this is a quote and is often a repeated saying of the Iroquois. However, despite a common belief, it is not contained to the constitution of the Iroquois nation. And there's a little quote from the doctrine there. We're not going to look too much at, but I will leave it for a second if you choose to pause and look at that. And that is a passage from the Iroquois Nation readings or teachings, I'm guessing. But Oren Lyons, chief of the Onondaga Nation, writes, "We are looking ahead as one of the first mandates given to us as chiefs to make sure and to make every decision that we make relate to the welfare and well-being of the seventh generation to come. What about the seventh generation? Where are you taking them? What will they have?" So basically, again, first generation of technology that was delivered to humanity. What will the seventh generation of digital technology look like to humanity once it rolls around, and what impact on life will it have? And you cannot deny the impact on our social behavior patterns as human beings has changed dramatically since the emergence of digital technology, in particular smartphones, social media, networking. We no longer go out and meet friends. We sort of talk on Zoom. We have messenger chats. We don't even go out and date now. We do it all online via Tinder and other sort of Plenty of Fish type apps. So it's hard to ignore the impact that digital technology has had on humanity. But just what an impact is it going to have on humanity by the time we reach 7G is why I am bringing this to you. As I said, we're not going to read it all because my eyes are absolutely shot to pieces right now. It's like I've had 10 pints of lager and 16 shots of whiskey to wash them down with. I've got that blurred beer goggle effect going on right now. But in reaction to consumerism, and they use these sort of impacts again in consumerism, in advertising, sort of introducing products again like digital products and introducing certain things to society that will have a direct impact and change the way we do things. Like once upon a time we had pierced ears, and it was like, oh my goodness, if you were a boy and you had a pierced ear, you were radical, or sort of a little bit out there. But now it's sort of almost uncommon to see people, certainly of a younger generation, without piercings. For one example, so the first generation of boys to get a piercing was their ear. The seventh generation of boys to get piercings have a Prince Albert. If you don't know what a Prince Albert is, that's when you have your penis pierced and have a big ring put through the end of it. Why, only to God knows that a male would want to put himself through that, but they do that. But anyway, in consumerism, the effects of seven generation sustainability affluenza, another interpretation that stresses stewardship owned to generations past and future, sometimes arises in popular culture and discourse, and through a series of memetics that culture spreads. And as we sort of, memetics isn't just about memes that you share on social media. Memes or memetics is from the Greek word to mimic, and we copy the fashions that we see the pop stars or movie actors wearing. We copy the habits that we see maybe in popular sitcoms like Friends, and then go out and, oh, lo and behold, there's a Starbucks with coffees in giant cups. It's just like being in the movies, and this is how these things spread and become aware, and develop through time. So sort of societal changes that you make within the first generation would also have a huge impact in societal behavioral patterns in the seventh generation. Changing how we behave now will have a dramatic change on how they act in 7 generations to come. If you get what I'm trying to say, hopefully this isn't too confusing, but I'm trying to give you this as a point of reference and a little bit of information that there is a principle of 7 generation sustainability. And are they using those principles for dire in draconian purposes in the form of technology and 5G? And when we're looking at these weapons of mind distraction, is this the 5th generation of people to be affected by the effects of digital poisoning, I guess? I don't know what else to say. Digital influence over our minds. But there you go. I'm not going to read all of that because, as I said, my eyes are really, really, really going to pieces now. I can't see for shit. But you can pause if you want and read that for yourself. And it does give sort of like 100-year, 140-year timelines, and how sort of a great-great-grandmother who witnesses a newborn child, and a newborn child who then goes on to live to 90, how many people will touch in what sort of year span those individuals of knowing each other will progress throughout a generation. But a little bit of those principles are that, we sort of pass down our digital habits to our offspring, and they pass down their digital offspring to their offspring, and such forth and such forth and such forth. It still applies in terms of that. But that, as I said, is mostly what they're saying here on Wikipedia. And if you so want, you can look further into it. But I did just want to give you a little bit of a brief introduction to what it is, and if or not we develop or explore this anymore in the future will remain to be seen, depending on interest or lack of. But that was, as I said, a little bit of what 7 generation sustainability is. And as we said, anything that can be impacted on the first generation can and will most likely have a direct impact on the 7 generations to come. So what impact are we going to see once we reach 7G digital technology, and just how much power and control over humanity in society is it going to have already? And one example of digital control over humanity was Pokemon Go. And just look how that managed to control the minds of millions and millions and millions of individuals around the world, and turn them into zombies, basically, that were following around pixelated creatures on their phones that didn't exist. So that's it, guys. Let's wrap it up. As I said, I need to give my eyes a break, maybe go and get a bite to eat while this is editing and processing for the stream you have just watched. And we are about to return now live to the Thrift Store studio, where Reality Decoded will recommence.
As you mentioned, my name is Misha Sra, and today I'm going to talk about something that most all of us are using right now. And I don't mean your phones. I'm going to talk about your ears. So in 1790, Alessandro Volta, he had just invented the battery, and he put the electrodes in his ears and then promptly passed out. And Right before he passed out, he said he felt the sensations of spinning. And most likely that sensation was from vestibular stimulation, which is what I'm going to talk about over the next several minutes. Right before I get into it, let's take a moment to think about balance. Balance is something most of us take for granted, right? Most of us can easily walk across a gravel path. We can transition from walking on a sidewalk onto grass, back onto the sidewalk, and we don't really have to think about it. People don't normally stumble doing those things. Now, maintaining balance requires that the brain receive information from three main sources. You need information from your visual system, so data coming in from the eyes. You need information from your proprioceptive system, which is your muscles and your joints. And as an example of proprioception, some of you want to follow along, or all of you, if you hold out your fingers just like that in front of your face, close your eyes, and touch the tip of your nose with your finger and eyes closed. And most everybody can do that with some amount of success, right? And that's because of your sense of proprioception, this inner sense that we have. So the third thing the brain needs is information from your vestibular system or your inner ear. So what exactly is going on inside your ear? Turns out a whole lot. The sensory information about motion, about equilibrium, about spatial orientation, all of this information goes from your vestibular system to your brain. And in each ear, you have what constitutes the vestibular system, which is what I just highlighted with a rectangle. It's three semicircular canals that are at right angles to one another, and they take care of detecting rotational movement. And then you have the utricle and the saccule. Those take care of detecting gravity as well as linear movement. It's kind of like the gyroscope and the accelerometer working in your phone. It's the same kind of system, and it's a pretty amazing system. So the semicircular canals are filled with a fluid called the endolymph, and at the base of each canal is a cupula and some hair bundles inside it. So if you look on the right side of the image, when the person rotates, the fluid gets sloshed around, and when the fluid moves, the hair moves, and then the hair sends a signal to the brain telling what's happening, right? And then there's three semicircular canals. There's essentially the anterior canal, which detects motion like this, like head nodding. There's posterior canal, which detects motion like a head tilt towards your shoulders. And then there's the lateral canal that detects motion like a swivel, your head going side to side. The utricle and the saccule, they work slightly differently. They have tiny calcium carbonate crystals, kind of like tiny bones, that are floating on top of a gel membrane, inside of which there's again hair bundles. And so when you look at the person bending over to pick up a box, the bones get pulled down because of gravity. And they pull the gel membrane along, and then the hair gets pulled along, and again the hair sends a signal to the brain saying, all right, this is what's happening. So the utricle largely sits horizontally in your head, and that's how it detects movement in this plane, things like moving forward, side to side. The saccule sits vertically in your head, and so it detects movement in the vertical plane, things like sitting down or standing up. When all of this works, people can do some really amazing things with balance, right? But what happens when things don't work right? What happens if the signals that are going to the brain just don't line up? Well, that's when you get motion sickness, right? So motion sickness essentially is a mismatch of signals that are sent to the brain from your eyes and your ears. And I imagine a lot of people have experienced this here. When you're reading a book in a moving car, your ears are telling the brain, I'm moving. But your eyes are telling the brain, nope, we're not moving, because you're essentially static relative to the car seat, the floor beneath your feet. And so it's this disagreement between those two signals that triggers nausea and vomiting, right? The same thing happens in virtual reality. Like VR, as it exists right now, essentially depends on visual information. And so the possibilities of what we can see in VR, practically endless. However, what we can feel in VR is very limited, right? Most of the time, you just feel like you're standing in your living room or sitting on your couch, even though you may be flying or swimming or doing all sorts of things in VR. Now, what if we could make you feel this motion? What if we could fix motion sickness? That's exactly what we did when we built a vestibular stimulation device. It basically is a small wearable that can automatically sense when to provide you the right type of feedback when you're in VR. The way it works is that we place electrodes behind each ear, and then we hook up the device to a small battery, and then we stimulate the nerves that I talked about earlier, the nerves that go from your inner ear to your brain. We stimulate them with a small amount of current, something like maybe 1 milliamp. So electrically stimulating the vestibular system is called galvanic vestibular stimulation, or GVS. We tested our device, we tested GVS in a VR roller coaster experience. You can imagine what a VR roller coaster might feel like. And in this case, it went from a vomit fest to something that people actually found thrilling and exciting. People are like, I want this in my home, I want to do it all the time. And they said that they could feel every turn of the roller coaster in their body, something that they'd expect to feel on a real roller coaster. Another thing we can do in VR, which is what I started to talk about, is remote control people. Basically, how can we steer people using GVS? And if you watch in the video, the person actually intends to walk straight, but they end up turning quite smoothly. And that happens, well, there's a prerequisite for it, that you need to be looking down when you do apply GVS. So if they had been looking up and we had applied GVS, they would have staggered. And that almost feels like somebody's pushing you. That doesn't feel comfortable. But this is fairly comfortable. You just turn towards the anodal direction quite smoothly. So we use this idea in building a two-person VR game, kind of like an escape the room VR game where there's one person who's in VR and they're in a dark room. They can't see anything, but they can hear things around them. And then the other person is using a tablet or a PC. And their task is to use GVS to steer the person in VR around obstacles, help them escape the room, right? So it's a collaborative game. So this is all well and good. It's all fun and it's pretty interesting. But what else can GVS do, right? Volta didn't stick electrodes in his ears just for the sake of doing so. What he wanted to do was see how stimulating the ear could be done electrically. He wanted to see how it would impact hearing. Similarly, other researchers in the 1800s, they also tried using vestibular stimulation to see if it would fix deafness or if it would cure other diseases of the ear. Now, doctors are starting to use vestibular stimulation for things like therapy, rehab, even for training, athletic training enhancement. Scientists are starting to use GVS, trying to see how really low levels of stimulation can actually impact higher order brain function. Things like tactile sensation, face recognition, and even memory. Right, so as a last thought, we all know that machines are getting smarter by the day, right? And what if we could evolve alongside the machines? Now, brain hacking has been a futuristic fascination for decades, but we all understand that actually fully understanding the brain is going to take many, many years of work. But with GVS, we can actually get started right now by building devices that can impact small parts of the brain, hack those little areas, just like the one we created. Thank you very much.
And there you have it. That thus concludes our feature presentation this series, this evening. My God, guys, I am feeling punch drunk or all over the place. But anyway, let's get the camera back on. Let's get rid of the presentation video for you and resume. See, my mind's gone, guys, honest to God. And I'm by no means have been exaggerating through that presentation, that honest to God, that once that started, my head started pounding, and not so long ago I got a little bit of the palpitations, and I don't know if you can see or not, and trust me, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm shaking. So yeah, I did have a little bit of a can of soda. I had some ginger ale, and that did sort of help my headache. But I'm still pounding, sort of kind of a little bit light sensitive. And again, for looking at what we just exampled, all these symptoms I'm experiencing are stuff that we've just looked at, that are a result of electromagnetic frequency. And again, my eye feels very stuffy. Sorry, I am sort of struggling a little bit to think right now. But as I said, guys, I'm glad you found that fascinating trip. And thank you and Devil. You guys were both contributing an awful lot of stuff, and this is what I kind of like to see, from the chat. A lot of interaction, a lot of people contributing. And funny enough, that was one of the more interactive streams that I think we've said. And thank you, Devil. I'm glad you appreciated it, because I was a little bit sort of reluctant after recording it. Oh my God, did I make a mess of this? Because I am feeling some very sort of strange symptoms. And even now, I kind of feel, I mean, I did just step outside not long ago for a quick smoke, but sort of very shaky and shivery. So if it is a result of maybe not eating anything today, or if this is the effects of electromagnetic frequency or not, one can only wonder. But something I have noticed an awful lot, that when I do put these presentations together, and certainly if I sort of put the long ones or the longer presentations, like 2.5 hours, by the end of that recording, my head is ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. And that is because, most of the time when I record, I'm this close to the phone. I kind of got it here, and I'm recording, reading what I'm seeing, because I screen record. And that is another thing, my voice is usually that close to the microphone, not much further than that away from the audio. And sometimes when you get these presentations, the voice, my talking is a little bit low. And yeah, I agree, Mrs. L. That's sort of something in the summer that I really do spend as much time as I can outside in this summer, due to the fact that, I was out of work and didn't have anything to do. I got to spend a whole lot more time outside than I have in a long, long time. I was sleeping healthy. I was, getting up early in the morning, wasn't sort of feeling lethargic, feel energy, so I had a skip in my step. And certainly didn't feel any sort of, certainly some of the symptoms that I've been feeling as a result of being sort of cooped inside these cold, dark months. And, when I am cooped up inside, I am surrounded not only by my technology. There's other, there's 4 units in my building. There's everybody that is in this building has electronic devices, Wi-Fi. Outside there are towers. It surrounded me, but when I was outside in the summer, I was running around barefoot. Dear God, Martha, you're down in the south, sweetheart. There's an inch thick of ice before you can even get to the ground. Right now, there, yeah, is valuable as it would be to do a bit of grounding. Yeah, frostbite would probably kick in before the grounding effects had any wholesome values and properties on the body. But that was exactly what I did in the summer. I was running around half naked, drenched in the sun, dopamine from its natural source, vitamin D, grounding all the time. It was sometimes days at the lake before I come back home, just to sort of maybe wash, clean up, get some more supplies and go back to the lake. Oh my God, hundreds made, and I could, if it was light, I could go outside and point the phone and show you at least two of them within 100 yards or 100 meters of where I live. And this is a big, huge metropolis of a city. It's one of the biggest cities on the planet. It is absolutely saturated by radio waves, frequencies, and such forth. Yeah, that would be a little, that's one of the things with social distancing. Some of the massage parlors are no longer open. Spring is on its way, but it can't come soon enough, Mrs. L. I mean, this really is a time of year, March, the winter blues, and in the doom and gloom of those dark, cold months are really piling on top. Now, Trip mentioned something, withdrawals from the sleeping pills. Now, again, some of the symptoms are very similar to sort of getting a bit dope sick, or going through cold turkey, when you sort of, it does finally go out of your system. You sort of get the cold sweats, feel a little bit clammy and a bit shivery, and sort of want to crawl over the under the covers, which is kind of what I want to do now. But sorry, I just lost my train of thought there, cloud fog. But hopefully, as I said, guys, the information that I am bringing you is beginning to sort of resonate and piece together the puzzles that may be afoot and being used. These technologies that are being used against us. Yeah, lots of things sound wrong. Devil, my buddy. Lionbow, but I live in a population of 200. Yeah, exactly. You've probably only got one 5G. No, don't apologize. As I said, this is kind of the diversity of our little community here. That we got people in tiny communities like yourself, people in huge big cities like me, and some of our Texans down there. If I take too many, it makes me itch, and I get a restless leg syndrome. Take too many sleeping pills, Martha, or are you talking about having a smoke there? But I still got a little bit of the shakes going on. So as I said, if or not it is the results of, quite possibly could have a mix of column A and a mix of column B, some effects of the sleeping pills, and maybe the results of some of the electromagnetic frequencies. And again, sometimes when I do put these presentations together, I may spend 3, 4, 5 hours where I am like literally locked into my phone, either recording or editing. In any time throughout the presentation, I've got my computer on, obviously the phone and the device that I'm streaming on, and then I have my other backup phone there. Judging again from the sort of comments through that presentation, a lot of people were adding some good stuff, and good for you, Nancy. You really did limit your emojis there, but the end part from the TED talks about the VR and how you can just put this device on and it works better when your head is down, and you can control your thoughts from miles away. Someone in a darkened room, they use the example of the escape room virtual reality simulation thing there. And again, I reference Pokemon Go. Many times is an example of human farming via electronic shepherds, so to speak, and how people kind of were submerged within an augmented reality. It wasn't a virtual reality. They were in the real life, but they were chasing an augmented reality. The little pixelated Pokemon. But if you go and look on YouTube after this is done and put in Pokemon Go herds or hordes, you will look at people just like the little comic description at the end when I put Dawn of the Digital Dead, little ode to George A. Romero's classic Dawn of the Dead, which kind of depicted society as a bunch of brain dead zombies. That was what he was mirroring in that movie. It wasn't really necessarily about living corpses feasting on the remaining survivors. Our heads are down. What exactly they are, you see, and when they are down, people are wearing headphones more often than not. Thank you for that, Mrs. Allen. Great of you made to point up, and a little bit of what's going on now is kind of some of the things I've try to get. Sometimes, you know, when you don't get much of a reaction from this sort of chat, it makes me think, shit, that wasn't a very good presentation. But this is very rewarding despite all the symptoms and weird goings on in my head at the moment. Yeah, I have seen that you can get some caps. Now, something I do at night, courtesy of my weed deliveries, I've got a whole bunch of these mylar bags. Some of you are lucky enough to receive them as nut sacks. So what I do at night is I put both my phones in here, and I usually turn them off as well, and seal it up and leave it as far away from my bed as I can. And I also have this little kind of, hold on, I forget what it's called. I don't leave it close to the computers because this actually does sort of soak up Wi-Fi rays apparently, and I keep this by my bed. I'm going to move it away just in case. And I never ever wear headphones. I always kind of listen via the speaker. Yeah, and I do truly believe, and this is what we hear about unimaginable weapons. Headphones and a Walkman and a cell phone would be unimaginable weapons. Most people who try to imagine unimaginable weapons still imagine weapons that look like weapons. And you know, another thing that we sort of featured greatly, or not necessarily greatly, but featured in the 1985 Decoded, that back in the 80s we had a lot of that kind of synthetic materials, not only in clothing, but I remember in England, my grandmother, sorry, it does feel as though I've just run a few hundred yards, but my grandmother, she had the whole house decked in this new carpet. It was called Flotex, and basically stuff would just like lie on the surface. If you spilt something, it just wiped off. But we were always getting static shocks, and he's not here tonight, but Marjuk mentioned a couple of weeks ago he took his pajamas off and he actually saw static sparks. And another thing that's very popular back in the 80s was kind of like tracksuits, and if you remember, you kind of used to walk with your tracksuit pants. They'd kind of make a little sort of staticky sound each time the legs rubbed together. So were these sort of conductors or devices that also had an impact over frequencies and stuff like that, or you know, did they act as conductors of sorts? Also a fabric known as Velistat. There it is. I knew a burp was coming. Baby P, that was for you. But as I said, swishy pants in Vela. Do you remember that kind of sort of stuff? It wasn't velvet, it was like a synthetic velvet. I remember having a couple of cardigans and sweaters out of that stuff, and we used to get lots of static electricity. Same thing with this like carpet. Used to be able to get like couches and chairs that had that kind of synthetic material that you could kind of wipe clean. Was this a device that when you kind of sat in it, you watched the TV or you plugged, it all kind of connected together? We used to have a dance floor with lights over, again, discos, raves. My God, when we went to the raves, we were full of psychedelic drugs and amphetamines and strobe lighting and laser beams and technotronic music pumping through the minds. God only knows what happened. Yeah, corduroy as well. I used to have a nice pair of Lois cords. Don't know if you remember the label Lois, but back in the 1980s, they were the corduroy trousers to have, or corduroy pants. I said trousers in for those of you that like the Britishness. But yeah, there were other things that kind of you could hear when you walked and kind of swished and stuff. You know, and also the terry toweling socks. Do you remember those? Of course you love corduroy, Nancy. I can imagine you back in the 70s with some big old corduroy bell bottoms in one of those little headbands and the hair dancing around. And Martha still has a pair. Maybe you should post pictures of your flares. And I think by all accounts, flares are back in fashion. The skinny look is out and flares are back. And, you know, every sort of 20 or so years, they recycle the fashions. You know, back in the 1980s, I can remember that jeans were very, very skin tight, and we used to call them drain pipes. And the narrower the ankle, the better it was. And you literally used to, I'm sure some of you ladies, you know, had to squeeze into them and then get, you know, a pair of pliers to pull the zip up, and once they were done up, that was it. You couldn't get out of them for the rest of the night. But in the 1990s, jeans become almost like skirts. I can remember like having bottoms on my jeans. It was so big you couldn't even see my feet. Yeah, hip huckers, you know, and that's the thing. Sometimes they come high banded, then they go low waisted or hipster. In just recently, mom jeans were fashionable bunch. It looked absolutely hideous looking at these like young girls walking around with jeans up to their boobs and their sort of belly bulbing out, and like, what the fuck are you doing? And that doesn't look good at all. But you're only wearing it because mimetically you were shown it in a Vogue magazine or on a social media site, and copycat, you went out, monkey see, monkey do. And the other thing is that when you do go to these high street stores, they don't really give you the option. You have to buy the latest trends. And zippers as well. Also had a little bit. I never like to buy zipped pants, or like buttonfly pants if I can help it. I don't ever trust zips. And again, sort of having metal gadgets sort of that can catch things in next to your junk doesn't you know, sit too well with me, if you get what I mean. The stirrup pants, yeah, the ones that had the things that went under your feet. I can remember the girls wearing those with the pixie boots. Always a hassle to get off. Some of my earlier sort of conquests were with weird clothes such as those. But anyway, loose fit is better for the old meat missiles. And again, yeah, sort of going commando and letting it all hang free. There's a lot to be said for that. And again, some of these underwear that we wear these days, both women and male, you know, they're kind of made out of these weird synthetic things that God only knows what they're doing to our reproductive systems. But artificial interference, electromagnetic frequencies, mind control devices, mind control weapons, it exists, people. You decide if or not you are the victim of this weaponry and technology. I really have to say that, you know, I've experienced so many of the symptoms, and even through this stream I've experienced some of the symptoms we've looked at. Some of you guys also have been commenting along saying you've experienced some of these symptoms, so make of it what you will. Sorry, I really do feel out of breath. Silk, of course you do, you're a lady. Ladies like expensive things. Why like polyester when there's a much more expensive fabric out there? Well, thank you, Martha. I mean, again, I'm not necessarily telling you I'm right. You have to pay attention, share if you agree. I know 90% of you aren't. I am trying to bring you as much information for you guys to make up your own mind. And the more you kind of see it, and the more you kind of piece together all of these articles, and we have put an awful lot of footage together for information purposes over the last, you know, few months in regard to this. And is this kind of how, you know, or the smokescreen that is COVID, is this kind of how they're manipulating it and keeping it going, is by controlling the minds of people into believing it's real? What part of stay the fuck home don't you understand? Those types. And the others, oh my God, don't wear a mask, what's wrong with you, we're fighting for your freedom. Are these people being provided with these thoughts and narratives to carry out the psyop, the false flag, the control, the problem, reaction, solution, Hegelian dialect? If you get me, mutual. If it takes me 10 minutes to undress a woman, she has 10 minutes to change her mind. To dang it. Well, yeah, I kind of just was outside in the cold, fresh air. Maiden, it's not really pleasurable to be out for too long, but I do try and get outside for most of the day. Actually, in the daytime, I had the window cracked open as much as I could tolerate, and I actually was shivering a little bit while I was recording, just to let some air into the house. But luckily enough, we've got a couple of days coming up this week where we're going to be seasonally above normal, and we're going to be in double digits, plus double digits. That is like, fuck me, I can't remember March seeing the dizzy heights of that. But yeah, I am in much need of lengthy periods of time outside, and definitely in much need for some warmth and vitamin D and dopamine from my friend the sun. Yeah, it's wet and cold. I mean, the snow is sort of melting, but it's sort of so cold that the melted snow's just turned to ice, and there's sort of like a layer of ice underneath the snow where the last snow sort of started to melt but didn't melt enough before the next snow comes. And unfortunately, once the 2 or 3 days of above normal temperatures are done and dusted, we go back to sort of winter-like conditions, and more snow on the way for next weekend. So what's the time at? 2 hours and 32 minutes. So let's try and aim for 2:45 as the wrap-up time. I don't think I can carry on for another 28 minutes unless anybody has anything particular of interest to add in the chat. So we will try to wrap it up, as I said, in the next 15 minutes, just to comply with my OCDs and stupid time frames, although it doesn't really make a difference, to be honest with you. But it also does give a little bit of a window of opportunity for some of the gussets to make their appearance. So if you are on the sideline, gusset girls, now is the time to make yourself, your presence aware. I've recently just started opening the doors to the house for at least 15 minutes during the day. Yeah, I do actually, Mrs. Owl, as well. Usually when I go to take my shower, because it gets hot and steamy in the shower, I do open my window as wide as it will go, just to let some fresh, crisp air in. And then when I come out of the shower, I shut it up pretty rapidly. And something I grew up with as a kid was my mum. We always used to have airing day during the winter when we'd have to literally open all the doors and windows in the house and let some air get through. But as I said, I am kind of in the basement and only have one window, so there's only a door, and it sort of does get a little bit too cold to have them both open. But it's kind of hard to get a crosswind through. But letting some fresh air in does really help. Yeah, thanks for rubbing in the higher 60s. Literally, I would kill disabled children for it to be 60 degrees right now. I wouldn't. That's like metaphoric. Don't sort of go reporting me to CPS. Oh, we had an attic fan. Oh, whoa, I didn't know it was a thing. It is surprised in how some of these sort of old values, and again a little bit what we're talking about, modern technology, some of these things are being erased, and are very vital to our existence. Fresh air and stuffing. Well, once upon a time, Martha, I did live in sunny California primarily for that purpose, never to feel cold again and always be surrounded by sunshine. Didn't end as well as I hoped. And I do actually have a very good friend from California that moved to Texas, Houston, Texas, who's always offered me a sanctuary and place to stay. So I don't know if or not I will ever find myself in the United States again. Certainly with the way it is looking at the minute, I would almost suggest for you guys that are in the United States, get the fuck out. FEMA are in place. We might do a little bit of a FEMA. I did have a second part to the Camp FEMA War Martial law, but due to the fact that it did get community struck on TSP TV, I thought maybe let's not aggravate the algorithm too much and get Reality Decoded shut down. But funny enough, on Reality Decoded, Camp FEMA War Martial Law is still up there. It's funny enough, when you live in California, you kind of think Texas sucks. Funny how that works, Martha. But Jim Morrison, that good old CIA Tavistock Institute mind control icon of the 60s psychedelic era, once said classically and famously, West is the best. Get here and we'll do the rest. And that's what I'm saying. If the Californians still keep going to Texas, then it'll be Texasfornia. But as I said, the way the United States is going now, and you've got your own little fascist dictator Biden, or Biden, whatever his name is, in charge, they're all the fucking same. They're just puppets to the elites. Doesn't really matter. He's just there to read the rules that they want you to hear. But as I said, the United States is possibly somewhere I don't really want to be at the moment, due to the where things are going right now. And to be quite honest, Canada isn't much better. If anything, it's probably worse. But there's a lot of goings on, and as I said, FEMA are, as we did look in war martial law, in 11 states, looking to move into more with these vaccination camps. And what is their purpose? And again, I was going to bring you some information on them turning up for, I believe it was called Operation Tripod, which was supposed to take place on 9/12/2001. And luckily enough, FEMA turned up on 9/10/2001, the Monday before that famous Tuesday in September, to set up for the drill a triage center, which so valuable the next day when a real actual disaster happened. And they were there. The drill they were running was, funny enough, a counter-terrorism drill. Now, they were in place before it happened. Funny enough, they were also in place on the Boston bombing. By all accounts, I think they were there as some sort of help or subsidiary to the event of the bombing. But as I said, FEMA seem to have a knack of being in place when these accidents or events seem to happen. Is it convenient or is it coincidence? Yeah, where are the bananas? But that's something we might bring you tomorrow. I do have Annie lined up at some point, just coinciding with her to come on as a special guest for you all, as something I would like to sort of feature as regularly as I can, as maybe bring another mind and another voice into the proceedings, just to get a different view and perspective on the goings on. But yeah, that is some stuff that I do have lined up. I don't even know what else I've got lined up for you, to be quite honest, at the minute. As I said, I do get a little bit brain dead and foggy since the start of this stream, and as I said, is it necessarily the results of the symptoms of too many sleeping pills taken at one time finally coming out of the system, or is it a little bit of the effects of symptoms we've just learned about? So 5 minutes, look at that, managed to squeak through there. What are you saying? Has anyone else noticed that? Notice what? Sorry, DS, did I miss something above? I like my weather. We do have 4 seasons, so we don't get extreme cold or extreme hot for long here. I have yet to see Air Force One being called Air Force One. Is that since like Biden's taken over? Something of interest that we did mention at the start of the pandemic. Remember, we are a year into this, but the government handed over power to FEMA back then, and that is why the crest of the presidential crest is no longer on display when you see presidential addresses. Certainly while Trump was still in charge, the eagle had vanished and it just said the White House, and this is an indication that the president is no longer in charge. The Federal Emergency Management Agency is in charge. And this is exactly what the danger of emergency powers and emergency legislation is, because there's no contingency to return back from the emergency powers. And when they put these in, emergency powers supersede the federal legislation of how government runs in opposite. No, I don't really have those things trip. As you do know, I am a little bit of a broke ass honky at the best of times, and I was a broke ass honky when I did have a full-time job. Now I don't have a full-time job, even more of a broke ass honky, but I do, have sort of quite a lot of provisions in preps left in the pantry, although it's mostly sort of beans and the shitty stuff that I'd rather not have to eat if I didn't have to. But if I didn't have anything else, it would be invaluable. And lucky enough, the foresight to put together a pantry. And I did have at one point around a year's worth of food that has seen me through the duration of this pandemic. And I was, because I was service industry, we were the ones that were sort of forced out and told to stay home before everybody was told to stay home, and they announced it as a global pandemic. So it has been around a year that I've been out of work, a year I've been living on my pantry, and sort of a year that I've sort of been trying to make my living as a result of streaming on YouTube. I did just notice we've gone up to 12 viewers. Always happens when we get close to the end. The numbers are always their highest. We never ever see the 12s and 13s at the start of the stream, but we always do at the end. This is it. The fencing and barriers in DC are permanent. They've also said that the National Guard are going to be deployed on the streets of DC until the end of this year. That is your martial law in place. Everything is there. It is all there in plain sight for you to see. This is the New World Order unfolding before our eyes, and the denial that it isn't happening, and maybe QAnon is going to come and save the day, and his plans should have been trusted all along, and God hope that QAnon isn't real and this is the plan we're supposed to trust. But anyway, no one's coming to save the day, and don't want to be that guy, but you do know I am an atheist. You've got to imagine right now in the world the amount of people who are a religious doctor, they're religious, be it Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh. Many of these people must be praying to their gods of choice right now. Please end this nonsense. Let's get back to normal. Please, God, I'm begging of you, answer my prayers. And not one of those gods is answering any of those prayers. So if or not you believe this is the will of God, or whether the will of mankind is stronger and greater than that as to why we are in the situation now. And what is probably more powerful than it all is the power of technology. Orange, you glad I'm not a banana? Okay, so we've all gone on to the fruit. Masks don't really matter. Well, I don't think they ever mattered. It was just to see who was obedient. It is a very, very visual, recognition. You can see on the street who's wearing the mask, who's complying, who's not wearing a mask, who's not complying. And then with the data that they can collect via social media networks that are all synchronized together, they can pretty much accurately depict who is on the side and in favor, and won't be too much of a trouble to the one world order. And then maybe people like myself are trying to sort of make people aware of what is possibly truly going on, might be targets. So that is why, if it ever comes to be, touch wood, I get my father's estate finalized, and finally can get what is rightfully mine as an inheritance. I'm heading to Central America, guys, and dealing with the corruption of cartels and drug barons, and maybe buy myself a coca plantation of my own, out of sight, off the grid, where you can just give a few $100 to the local law enforcement to look the other way. But as I said, guys, I'm pretty sure that not everyone's just going to get up and suddenly mass exodus from the United States. Many people are very, very ingrained in its fabric, and it is a place that I've always had fond regards to war, and certainly somewhere I'd much rather be than Canada. Certainly in sunny California in February and March is a much better place than Southern Ontario. But anyway, guys, as I said, I'm not trying to upset anybody by talking about gods not answering prayers. I am an atheist. I don't believe in any of those gods. And the only difference between atheism and monotheism, I can't say it, monotheism, it's a difficult word, too many T's and S's. But those that believe in one God is atheists. just believe in one God less than you do. Anyone want to go to Puerto Rico? I'd love to go to Puerto Rico, actually. Ricans are the best of all the Latina women. I'm not sure if the Puerto Ricans or the Costa Ricans are the better of the two, but Ricans certainly do have a certain spark to them that the rest of the Latin America doesn't seem to have. Breed of their own, a little bit like Hawaiians, I guess. Helicopters flying over my house with no lights. Two Chinooks, too dark to tell. Yeah, Chinooks have a very distinct sound to them, the twin propellers. Growing up in England, I was surrounded by RAF bases and the United States Air Force Base. RAF Fairford, RAF Lynham, RAF Bryce Northam, and also Greenham Common, you may have heard of back in the 80s, where they were campaigning nuclear disarmament and they housed cruise missiles. Cuba's very communist. It's beautiful like landscape, but tyrannical. That's where we're all heading. We'll all be Cuba soon. Cubanida. Don't forget, Justin Trudeau is the love child of Castro. Prove me wrong on that one, people. End times narrative. You got a video of the helicopters, and again, what we just saw about the helicopters earlier from 30 years ago. Make of that what you will. Portland and the riots. Yeah, Portland's a strange place. The birthplace of the hipster culture. And look at that. That is a wonderful example of mimetic mind control, where grown men looked and dressed like complete and utter tits with their fucking man buns and big beards and stupid skinny beards and then bow braces and bow ties. Fucking tits. What grown man in his fucking rightful mind would dress like that? Only a mind under only a man whose mind is under control of mimetic frequencies. He does look like Fidel. He's even growing the beard a now trip, if you've noticed, to look about it. Get his little fucking beret on him. He'll be pulling off a Che Guevara lookalike for Halloween. And look at that, we've run over the 2 hours 45 minutes. I don't know where all of a sudden I got on a roll, but maybe we'll just wrap it up at the 3 hour mark. Why not? You get an extra 12 minutes of tea for free. Don't tell me I don't give you more and more, ladies and gentlemen. And don't get too excited, those of you ladies who like to use my content for masturbation purposes. You know who you are, flicking your bean in the dark all alone while your husband's asleep. Joke. But there's Mrs. L right on cue. Lol, that's why I hang out with bikers. Well, my uncle, who may even be my dad, but I don't think so. My mum was a bit of a character, but anyway, I digress. He was an angel. He was a Hell's Angel, and actually was arrested in the United States for trafficking cocaine back in the 70s on the Queen Elizabeth II ship, the cruise ship. He had a job on there in the merchant navy, not the Royal Navy. Merchant is for commercial and sort of travel purposes. But yeah, back in the day, he was smuggling cocaine back from New York to Southampton, England via the QE2. Mods and rockers back in the day, of course, in London was a big thing. I don't know if mods were really that kind of subculture made it over to the United States, but mods were very, very big. The Who, you've heard of the band The Who? The Who were mods, but kind of acted like rockers. Very bizarre. 13 people now. Always get the most figures when we're about to end. 81, what are you talking about? 81, 1981 Devil or something else? 81 is code. 81, if that's biker code, I wouldn't know about it. I just know that I had a biker uncle who had some pretty fancy motorbikes, but I was never really into motorbikes. I actually do like scooters more than Harleys. A Vespa or a nice Lambretta, probably a little bit more European, I guess. The Harley kind of loses its charm on a little country road in England as opposed to the landscape of Route 66. HA, yeah, 18 is code for Adolf Hitler. One in and there was a sub sort of before Antifa, not before Antifa. Well, it was before Antifa, but there was sort of like the Antifa equivalent back in the 1990s, was called Combat 18, and they were a very right-wing, radical organization that infiltrated football hooligans in particular. That is, again, would you be interested if I did a football hooligan special, show you a little bit how I lived my misguided youth in the 1980s, but also the fact that this was football hooligans were used as part of mass control experimentation, and how we were kind of made to carry identification cards, how we were sort of criminalized just by wanting to go to football, a little bit like now we're sort of criminalized if we just want to go outside without wearing a mask and don't necessarily want a social distance, and we might not necessarily want to get medical treatment that we might not necessarily want to get, right? Hell's Angels. Okay, 81 course HA. It's the back to front. Hell's Angels. But as I said, my uncle, we used to have a little Hell's Angels chapel in my town. It's like a little fortress, and you used to get that's where in my local town sort of some of the more sketchier drugs, like you could usually buy sort of your hash and weed from most sort of sketchy teenagers, but if you wanted anything sort of a little bit more stronger and sort of party for the weekend, then you had to go and see the Angels. But HA, of course, makes perfect sense now. I didn't know if you were at first talking to the year 1981, there, Vancouver, BC. But yeah, Oregon, I've driven through Oregon. It's a beautiful, beautiful state. All the bit too wet for my liking, a little bit like England, but some beautiful, beautiful forests and mountains and stuff. And I have actually driven border to border the entire west coast of the United States. Something I'm a little bit proud of my achievements, but didn't get to go coast to coast, which was another little ambition. And I also want to do the East Coast border to border if possible, but unlikely to happen anytime soon, or if ever. So be thankful, I guess, for the time I did get to spend there, although in my opinion it's far too short, and wish I was still there in good old Southern California, where my heart and soul still rely. You should do it, Devil. What are you doing? Putting a photo for your icon, not your VR underpants. I rode with them in Phoenix and played a lot at the Mesa Clubhouse. You rode with riding with the Devils. There's a Hell's Angel Clubhouse in my neighborhood. Interesting. And Glynis, you've got a big muscle car, don't you, if I remember? Love the Who. What's that word? Teenage Wasteland. Interesting song. Listen to that again. Why don't you? But anyway, yeah, I see Martha said she would like a Vespa. I could see you zooming around on a Vespa with a funny helmet there. But I can definitely see Devil on a big chopper, a little bit like Dennis Hopper in Easy Rider. Who was the other one in that? Fonda, right? Peter Fonda, John Fonda? I can't remember. Anyway, I am just trying to fill time now to the 3-hour mark. I seen the Who live. I'm guessing that is live in Seattle. I'd imagine they would be a great band to see live. Dirty Dozen was absorbed by the Hell's Angels, and Glynis is confirming she has a 68 Camaro. I sort of like those old muscle cars more than motorbikes. Who are you? Who? That is also an Alan Partridge joke that I won't share with you because that will probably be lost. We got it, Glynis, unless of course you were a groupie that was servicing the band on the bonnet, or the hood, as you say in America, of your 68, whatever it is, Camaro there. Football hooligans. Yeah, we're a breed all of ourself, and something that is is creeping a little bit into North American culture. And believe it or believe it not, I do have a little bit of global presence within the world of football hooligans and within North American football culture. I'm a sort of bit of a public figure, to be honest with you. Do run quite a few football related groups, and just to give you a little example of how many people follow my football related groups, you probably couldn't fit them in your local sports stadium. You certainly couldn't fit everybody that is a member of my football related social media groups in the Toronto Sky Dome, or the Rogers Centre as it is now known, where the Blue Jays play. Over 50,000, actually it's closer to 60,000 people are members of my football related social media groups. I really sometimes think that if I did videos related to football hooligans, I'd probably have more than 13 people watching. I had a Bandit TA. The Smoking the Bandit Trans Am is probably my second car of dreams. The Bandit, eastbound and down. We're going to do what they say can't be done. But the Trans Am was my second car. The first one, believe it or believe it not, was the Griswold's station wagon from the first Vacation movie with that shit hot wood paneling. And the third, the DeLorean. Who wouldn't want the DeLorean? Although that probably would be my first choice right now. I'd switch it out with the Griswolds, because then I could go back in time to a time of my life when I was living in perpetual summer. I don't get rid of my first car. That's why I still have it. Well, classics are always the best. So there we are, guys. We are nearly close to the 3-hour mark. You did get 12 minutes of nonsensical rambling of my... I don't even know what I'm saying anymore, guys. So that is a good choice. Good time to probably wrap it in. My first car was a Pinto. My first car was a Mini Metro. Probably none of you in North America will even know what a Mini Metro is. So to the 13 of you that are currently watching, and we do have a couple of silent viewers, I'm guessing, in chat, or maybe that is just the algorithm manipulating the figures to make it look as though I've got more people watching than I really have. But anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in, and thanks for making this a more pleasurable experience than I thought it was, and certainly was one of the more interactive presentations in terms of comments and stuff coming in from the chat. So good stuff, guys. Like to see that, and it does certainly make it a little bit more worthwhile for me when I do sort of see the similar results and reactions as I saw tonight. So give yourself all an A+ and a gold star. You're the star pupils for this evening's presentation, although I'm not a professor and not a teacher. But once again, I did call that there'd be 11 people watching when there were 11 people watching. Am I a prophet and I just don't know it? Who knows? You decide, guys. Make of it what you will, as I always say. So till tomorrow night, 9 p.m, I don't know what we will bring in you content-wise. It'll be a surprise. I will see you again tomorrow, 3 nights in a row, and hopefully maybe we can get some normality and be back again next Friday. So until tomorrow night, guys, take care, look after yourselves, be excellent to each other, and keep it thrifty. And we will, as I said, see you tomorrow at 9 Eastern. Till then, good night, and may the force be with you.